Under a blazing Arizona sun, three ruthless outlaw bikers swaggered into a lonely gas station, laughing at the idea of trouble. But they had no idea they just crossed paths with the wrong woman, a decorated female Navy SEAL whose skill, grit, and courage were forged in the fires of combat. In seconds, their cocky smiles vanished as she taught them a lesson they'd never forget. This wasn't just a showdown at a dusty outpost. It was the beginning of an epic battle against corruption, cartels, and criminals who thought small towns were easy prey. If you love classic stories of honor, justice, and old-fashioned American bravery, buckle up. This tale will keep you at the edge of your seat. Subscribe now to follow this gripping journey and witness how one courageous veteran and ordinary citizens take back their community in an unforgettable clash between good and evil. Captain Zoe Harrington had chosen this remote desert highway for one reason. She was seeking solace after years of high-stakes missions that had chipped away at her peace of mind. From the passenger seat of her matte black motorcycle, she had already observed almost everything about Henderson's gas and repair before she pulled in. The station was a relic of a bygone era, nestled on the outskirts of a dusty Arizona town called Silver Butte. Red rock formations towered in the distance, their imposing shadows cast long by the late afternoon sun. Zoe killed the engine of her bike, stepping off with the smooth efficiency that came from years of intense physical training. This was supposed to be nothing more than a quick fuel stop on her journey to anywhere but here, but fate had other plans. Inside the station's small shop, Leo Henderson, the owner, was restocking the last few items on the shelves. Gray-haired with lines of experience etched into his face, Leo had the bearing of a man who had seen much of life's darkness. As a retired Air Force pararescueman, he recognized telltale signs of another veteran. Zoe's stance, her quick but deliberate survey of the surroundings, and the ever-watchful alertness in her eyes. She wore a simple black leather jacket that concealed a litany of scars, both physical and psychological. Zoe greeted Leo with a polite nod, scanning the cramped store and noting exits, dusty corners, and the old security camera perched at a dead angle near the ceiling. A single pickup truck rumbled to a stop outside. Through the glass pane, Leo and Zoe watched as three men rolled off their motorcycles right behind that pickup, their chrome engines growling. The patches on their leather cuts read Sable Reapers, an outlaw biker gang known across 3 states for dealing in extortion and intimidation. Their emblem was a stylized skull with a desert scorpion's tail, a brand that sent a chill through most onlookers. The riders strutted in as though they owned the place. Their leader, a wiry man with a jagged scar running down his left cheek, was known locally as Damon Reaper West. He scanned the station, zeroing in on Leo behind the counter before his gaze shifted to Zoe. The two bikers flanking Reaper were aptly nicknamed Viper and Rhino, the first tall and lean, sporting a myriad of snake tattoos, and the second a hulking brute whose arms looked like tree trunks. Their dynamic reeked of trouble. Viper's darting eyes surveyed potential threats, and Rhino's stoic presence loomed as sheer muscle. What might have been a tense but uneventful exchange took a sharp turn when Reaper opened his mouth. "Hey, old man," he said, voice dripping with condescension. "We hear you've been ignoring the new tax this month. Sheriff Grayson isn't going to be happy if you don't pay up." Zoe's attention snapped from her internal musings. The mention of the sheriff's name as an enforcer for a biker gang was more than a red flag. It was a siren call of corruption. Leo set down the item he was stocking, a subtle tremble betraying anger or fear. Zoe couldn't quite tell. She had no plan to intervene, not yet. But she was a coiled spring. The moment these thugs made a move to harm Leo, she would not hesitate. After everything she'd been through, there was a specific intolerance burning within her for bullies who preyed on the weak. Reaper took a step closer to the counter, his boots grinding against the dirty linoleum floor. He leaned on it with a smirk that made Zoe's blood run hot. "Sheriff Grayson wants local businesses to show their appreciation," he drawled, tapping a gloved finger on the counter. "So where's that envelope, Henderson?" The way he said Leo's name left no doubt. It was a threat disguised as a mere question. Behind Reaper, Viper's tattooed arms hung loosely at his sides, but Zoe's trained eye caught the subtle shift in his posture, the poised stance of someone ready to draw a blade or a pistol from a hidden holster. Rhino, on the other hand, looked every bit like a human battering ram, massive arms crossed, shoulders wide, ready to bulldoze whatever stood in his path. Leo's lips tightened. "I don't owe you or Grayson a damn thing," he replied, the quiet defiance of someone who had been in real combat zones. He tried to keep his tone steady, but Zoe could see the tension in the clenched jaw. Leo had no illusions about what might happen next. Over the past months, rumors had drifted to him of the Sable Reapers escalating from petty intimidation to something bigger. Whispers of large-scale drug operations and possible human trafficking. And now they were shaking down every small business in Silver Butte to cement their stranglehold, with a crooked sheriff in their pocket. Zoe sensed the pivotal moment arriving, that razor-thin line between a standoff and an explosion of violence. She stepped forward calmly, letting her gaze settle on Reaper's face. "Leave him alone," she said with measured composure. Her voice was controlled, but there was iron underneath. That single sentence drew every eye in the store toward her. Viper's eyebrows shot up. It wasn't often that a stranger, especially a woman standing barely at 5'6", challenged a known gang leader. Rhino let out a small grunt, half amused, half surprised. Reaper turned his full attention on Zoe, lips twisting into a mocking grin. "And who the hell are you supposed to be?" he asked, tone thick with derision. Zoe didn't answer immediately. She was busy calculating, scanning the positions of the bikers, measuring distances, noting how Reaper's stance suggested that a handgun might be tucked behind his belt. The old reflexes from her days in the Navy's most elite special warfare unit snapped into focus. She'd been on operations all over the globe, compound raids in Afghanistan, counter-piracy in the Gulf of Aden, hush-hush missions in conflict zones she couldn't even name. Compared to those, a few biker thugs in a dusty gas station seemed almost trivial. But underestimating an opponent was the quickest path to a coffin. When Zoe finally spoke, her words were clipped and direct. "I'm the woman telling you to back off," she said, "because if you don't, you'll regret it." The flicker in Reaper's eyes was part anger, part caution. Something about her stance, her unwavering stare, registered as far more dangerous than your average civilian. Leo from behind the counter looked poised to intervene, but he seemed to realize Zoe was fully capable of handling herself. Viper snarled and took a step forward, one hand twitching near his jacket pocket. Reaper raised a hand to halt him. "All right, lady," he said slowly, sizing her up. "You've got guts, but do you know whose business you're stepping into?" Zoe forced a tight smile. "Do you?" she returned. She made no move to show her weapon, not yet, but made sure every angle of her body language communicated that she was not prey. She was the predator. Tension knifed the air. Zoe could practically feel the adrenaline coursing through her. Reaper flicked his gaze to Viper and Rhino, giving a nearly imperceptible nod. In half a heartbeat, chaos erupted. Viper lunged, teeth bared in a silent snarl, his right hand swinging a switchblade out from his jacket. Simultaneously, Rhino charged forward, planning to overpower Zoe by sheer mass. Zoe pivoted with lightning speed, honed by countless hours of close-quarters battle, CQB training. She grabbed Viper's wrist, twisted it until the blade clattered to the floor, and delivered a precise knee strike to his midsection. He crumpled, gasping for air. Rhino was next. He barreled in, arms extended to grapple. Zoe used his momentum against him, ducking low and hooking her leg behind his calf. With a swift pivot, she swept Rhino off balance. The big man stumbled, arms pinwheeling, and slammed into a metal shelf full of oil canisters that tumbled down around him. His roar of frustration was muffled by the clattering debris. Before he could even struggle to his feet, Zoe was already stepping back, recentering herself to face Reaper. But Reaper didn't fight fair. While her focus was on neutralizing the other two, he drew a pistol from his waistband. "Enough of this," he hissed, pointing the barrel square at Zoe's chest. Time seemed to slow. Leo froze behind the counter, eyes going wide. Zoe's breath remained steady. She'd faced down muzzles before, but every instance felt as deadly as the first. Her survival instincts roared to life, scanning the environment for anything she could use in her favor. The question was whether she could disarm him before he pulled the trigger. A tense beat passed. Then, as if from thin air, Leo's voice cut through the room. "I wouldn't do that," he said firmly. In his hands was a weathered shotgun he kept under the counter for emergencies. It was leveled at Reaper with the unwavering poise of someone who'd once been in the thick of combat. "You pull that trigger," Leo warned, "and you'll be on the floor before you get off a second shot." For a split second, Reaper's eyes darted to the shotgun. That was the only opening Zoe needed. She stepped into Reaper's line, her left hand snapping up to deflect the pistol while her right fist struck the nerve cluster near his elbow. Pain arced across his face, his grip went slack, and the firearm clattered to the floor. Zoe followed with a swift elbow strike to his jaw, sending him staggering back. By the time Viper and Rhino had scrambled upright, Reaper was cradling his throbbing arm, his eyes filled with venom. Panting, Zoe kept herself between the bikers and Leo. Nobody in the station drew breath for a moment. Reaper finally broke the silence with a ragged chuckle that held no humor at all. "You'll pay for this," he spat, his glare shifting between Zoe and Leo. "Sheriff Grayson's going to hear about how you attacked us, how you threatened our lives." He forced a nasty grin despite the pain. "And we'll be back. Count on that." Viper, still wheezing, helped Rhino regain his footing. The three Sable Reapers retreated out the door, their venomous stares promising retribution. Leo lowered his shotgun, the tension in his shoulders gradually releasing. Outside, the fading roar of motorcycle engines left a heavy silence in its wake. Zoe exhaled and glanced around the station, noticing the disarray of scattered merchandise. Her own heartbeat pounded in her ears, and she had to remind herself she was no longer in a war zone, though it sure felt like one. Still, the moment of clarity told her this was far from over. Reaper had practically guaranteed that the local sheriff would take the biker's side. She retrieved the fallen pistol, ejected the magazine, and handed both to Leo. "Figure you might want these locked up just in case," she said, her voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of concern. Leo nodded, accepting the weapon with a grim expression. He set the shotgun and the pistol aside, then turned back to Zoe. "You saved my neck," he said quietly. "Thank you. But I also know how these guys operate. You just put a big target on your back." Zoe shrugged off the warning. She was no stranger to threats from dangerous men. "They were already coming after you," she replied. "I just happened to be here." She walked behind the counter and poured herself a small cup of coffee from a still warm pot. The simple act felt surreal, like normalcy clashing with the adrenaline spike she'd just experienced. It reminded her of those moments overseas, where lethal firefights could be followed by something as mundane as a snack if the environment allowed it. Leo closed the store's door, flipping the sign to close, and locked it. "Name's Henderson, Leo Henderson," he offered. "Been running this place for a few years, but with the Sable Reaper's influence growing around Silver Butte and a crooked sheriff at the helm, it's gotten tough. Hardly any support. Folks around here either cave in or disappear." He didn't specify what disappear meant, but Zoe could guess. Extortion could become kidnapping, or worse. She took a sip of her coffee, grimacing at its bitterness, but it helped ground her in the moment. "I'm Zoe," she responded, choosing not to elaborate on her rank or unit. She had no illusions that her background would stay secret for long. People in small towns had a way of prying, and the Sable Reapers probably had resources to find out more than she cared to share. "I'm just passing through," she continued. "Had no idea I was walking into a turf war." Leo gave a wry chuckle. "Passing through or not, you're neck deep now. If Reaper's men find you alone, they won't just talk tough." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silent, unspoken question filled the air. What now? Zoe finished her coffee and set the paper cup aside. Her eyes drifted to the deserted highway through the grimy window. She couldn't just ride away, leaving Leo and the rest of the townspeople vulnerable to this gang. Besides, the mention of Sheriff Grayson being in league with Reaper made her stomach churn. She had clashed with corrupt local officials before, but the last time that happened, it was in a foreign country, not in her own backyard. At length, Zoe said, "I don't like bullies. If these guys are making your life hell, maybe I can help." She surprised herself by how certain she felt. The last thing she wanted was another conflict, another so-called mission. But the idea of letting the Sable Reapers continue unchallenged was unthinkable. Leo's face lit up with a glimmer of relief, tempered by caution. "I'd appreciate the help," he said, speaking carefully, "but you have to know what you're up against." Sheriff Grayson isn't just turning a blind eye. From what I hear, he's getting a cut of everything the Sable Reapers bring in. Drugs, smuggling, protection money. They say the gang uses the old copper mine outside town for something big. No one's sure what exactly, but rumors point to a large-scale narcotics operation, maybe even human trafficking. The roads out there see less and less of the county patrol these days. Zoe frowned, recalling how Reaper had mentioned a tax and how everyone owed him and the sheriff. This was far beyond a small-time biker extortion ring. It echoed the patterns of larger criminal networks she'd encountered in her career. She set her mind on uncovering the truth. If the sheriff is in on it, she said, then we can't count on local law enforcement. We'll have to be careful. Leo nodded. Best approach might be to meet with Deputy Naomi Garcia. She's one of the few honest cops left, or so folks say. Might still be able to rally some help, quietly. His tone held a note of hope tinged with despair, as if he couldn't fully believe help could be found anywhere. Zoe mentally filed that name. A single ally inside a corrupt system could be a game changer, provided they could be trusted. Before they could delve further, the rumble of motorcycle engines returned in the distance, accompanied by the glare of headlights. Zoe stepped to the window, carefully peering through the crack in the blinds. A group of 5 or 6 Sable Reapers riders idled down the main highway, presumably searching for their leader. They must have heard something went down here, Zoe thought. Or Reaper already made the call. The bikers slowed, scanned the station, then roared off into the night when they saw no immediate activity. Tension coiled in Zoe's chest. She was experienced enough to know the calm after a firefight often signaled the beginning of a much bigger storm. We'd better lock down for the evening, Zoe advised. She checked the door, confirming it was secure. The station's lights were already low, and the dusty windows made it harder for anyone outside to see in. I'll keep watch for a while. Maybe you can get some rest, she told Leo. He shook his head. I've rested enough in my life, and I'm too old to sleep through a raid anyway, he joked, though his tone was wearied. With that, Leo began rummaging behind the counter and beneath floorboards, eventually pulling up a small stash of firearms and ammunition. Zoe raised an eyebrow. You expecting a war? Leo's mouth tightened into a grim line. When the Sable Reapers first came sniffing around, I started preparing. It's not much, but it's more than a lot of the folks here have. He paused, glancing toward Zoe. Although, after seeing what you did to those 3, I'm guessing you're more dangerous than a half-dozen guns on my rack. Zoe slid a compact sidearm from the stash, checked the chamber, and nodded in approval. Training helps, she said with no further elaboration. She had no intention of telling him about the storied background, the top-secret missions, the loss of friends, or the nightmares that sometimes still tore through her nights. She didn't want to glorify her past. It was heavy enough as a private burden. As the desert moon rose, bathing the gas station and the surrounding highway in pale silver, Zoe and Leo fortified themselves for a long night. They stacked a few heavy crates near the doors and windows, creating partial barricades that would provide cover if more bikers stormed in. Every so often, Zoe peered out at the empty highway, scanning for the telltale glimmer of headlights. Nothing moved except the wind-swirling dust across the asphalt. It reminded Zoe of nights in forward operating bases, where anticipation gnawed at her gut. She couldn't help but mentally divide the station into sectors of fire, just like she used to do with her platoon. Even though it was just her and Leo, that old sense of readiness surged to the surface, filling the quiet with unspoken tension. She checked her phone, remembering that in her hurry to get away from the memories that haunted her, she had left behind conventional means of contact. She still had a secure line for emergencies, a device designed for ex-military contractors and special operations personnel. It was a direct link to certain allies who owed her favors, but she hesitated to use it. Once that line was opened, everything would escalate. Leo, meanwhile, quietly told her more about Silver Butte. Once a thriving mining town, it had dwindled to a few hundred residents after the copper mines shut down years ago. Then the Sable Reapers arrived, and with them, a resurgence of underground activity. At first, people appreciated the economic bump. Bars and motels saw more customers, new money floated around. But that money came at a steep cost as the gang tightened its grip. Local businesses were forced to pay protection fees. Sheriff Grayson, who had run on a platform of law and order, soon revealed that his brand of law was for sale. It became clear that those who didn't comply risked harassment, violence, or worse. Naomi Garcia, a determined young deputy, had tried to push back. She cited laws and regulations, pleaded for investigations, and clashed with her boss at every turn. Yet each time she built a case, the evidence vanished or key witnesses recanted under duress. Over time, people resigned themselves to living under the Reaper's shadow, too afraid to fight back. But Leo suspected Naomi still harbored some plan to resist, if only she had the right support. Zoe listened to all of this in quiet contemplation. "So the big question," she said when Leo paused, "is what exactly is going on at that old copper mine that keeps the Reapers flush with cash and power? Drugs, guns, human trafficking, maybe all three. One way or another, we need to find out. If we can blow it wide open, we can cut off the head of this operation." Leo rubbed the back of his neck. "You say that like it's a walk in the park. That place is crawling with gang members. And if the rumors are true, there's even heavier firepower deeper inside. They've got trucks rolling in at odd hours. Nobody knows what they're hauling. The Reapers also have drones. Not the top-of-the-line military stuff, but enough to keep an eye on the roads." Zoe leaned back against the wall, her mind already mapping infiltration strategies. "No fortification is impenetrable," she remarked. "You just have to find the right angle of attack or the right blind spot. But first, we'll need inside intel. Someone with direct knowledge of their schedule, routes, and security protocols." As the hours wore on, neither Zoe nor Leo got much rest. They took turns peering into the darkness, each half expecting a retaliatory strike at any moment. But the night passed with only the low hiss of the desert breeze. By the time the first streaks of sunrise painted the sky, both were exhausted. Zoe brewed a fresh pot of coffee, and they sat in the dimly lit shop area, sipping quietly. The strong, bitter brew was their only comfort. Shortly after dawn, a dusty cruiser pulled up outside. Zoe tensed, ready for trouble. But from Leo's expression, she guessed this wasn't the sheriff. A woman with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun stepped out, wearing a deputy's uniform. Her face was set in a grave expression as she scanned the station's windows, presumably noticing the makeshift barricades. Leo rose to unlock the door for her. "Deputy Naomi Garcia," he announced, confirming Zoe's suspicion. "She's one of the good ones." Naomi entered cautiously, taking stock of the store's disarray and the battered shelves. Her gaze lingered on Zoe for a moment, assessing, gauging, before she turned back to Leo. "Heard there was an incident here last night," Naomi said, her tone as professional as she could manage. "I also heard Reaper and his crew claim they were assaulted. The sheriff is livid. He wants me to bring in the outsider responsible." She paused, eyes flicking to Zoe pointedly. Zoe stood, arms crossed. "I'm not surprised. I'm guessing Reaper spun a story that makes him look like the victim." Naomi gave a curt nod. "Exactly. But I'm here on my own. Had to know the truth. I've been trying to build a case against the Sable Reapers for months, but every time I get close, something goes wrong. Files vanish, witnesses clam up, or the sheriff calls me off." Leo cleared his throat. "Naomi, this is Zoe. She saved my life last night. Reaper and his buddies showed up threatening me, so Zoe intervened. They pulled guns and blades on her. There's no doubt in my mind they would have killed me if she hadn't stepped in." Naomi glanced around at the bullet casings and scattered merchandise that corroborated Leo's words. Her shoulders relaxed, but the worry on her face grew. "That lines up with the phone calls I got from folks who heard the commotion," Naomi admitted. "Look, I'm trying to do the right thing, but Grayson's got eyes everywhere. He's insisted that I deliver Zoe for questioning. If I refuse, he'll know where my loyalties lie. It'll be a one-way ticket out of the department, or worse. The Sable Reapers don't like turncoats any more than they like people who fight back." Zoe exchanged a look with Leo. She spoke softly but firmly. "Deputy, I respect what you're doing, but I'm not about to just hand myself over to a corrupt sheriff who answers to a biker gang. If we want real justice, we need to undermine their entire operation, not just fend off goons." Naomi studied her, a flicker of determination sparking in her eyes. "What are you suggesting?" Zoe took a step forward. "We find a way into that copper mine. We gather hard evidence, pictures, ledgers, shipments, anything that ties the gang's top brass directly to illegal trafficking or narcotics. Then we make it public. With federal intervention, Sheriff Grayson won't be able to hush it up. Naomi inhaled deeply, the weight of the proposition evident on her face. She was risking her career, her safety, everything. But if there was even a small chance to rid the town of this plague, she had to take it. We'll need more than just a few snapshots, she cautioned. We need ironclad proof to attract federal agencies' attention. DEA, ATF, maybe even Homeland Security if this crosses border lines. The Reapers are rumored to have connections in Mexico. If we can prove that, it's no longer just a local matter. Zoe nodded. Then that's the plan. But first, I'd like to know how extensive this operation is. We can't just storm the mine. We need to pick it apart systematically. She glanced at Leo. We might also want to talk to local folks who've been forced into paying protection or have witnessed the Reapers' activity. Maybe they saw or heard something about trucks, shipments, or odd nighttime movements. Leo's expression darkened. Most of them are terrified. They won't say a word, especially not if they think it could come back to them. But there is one place in town where people sometimes let their guard down. George's Diner. Morning coffee and gossip run thick there. You might pick up a lead if you're careful. Naomi's eyes flashed with a bit of hope. George is an old friend of mine. Let me reach out. If anyone's heard rumors about that mine, deliveries coming in or out, she'd know. The plan started to crystallize. Naomi would discreetly gather local gossip. Leo would help Zoe lay low at the gas station. And once they had a lead, they'd decide how to breach the mine. Zoe recommended they all keep communication minimal and use code phrases if they were being watched. Naomi confirmed her phone could be compromised, so they'd avoid any direct talk about the plan in texts or calls. This was starting to feel like a covert operation, the kind that Zoe had done in far-flung corners of the world. Except now it was on American soil, and the lines between friend and foe blurred more than ever. Before Naomi left, she handed Zoe a burner phone. It's not top of the line, but it's off the grid enough for now. I'll text you from a secure number once I have something. And Zoe, she paused, a solemn look on her face. If things go south, get out. The Reapers aren't the only ones we have to worry about. The sheriff's men can be just as bad. Zoe acknowledged the warning with a silent nod. Once Naomi drove off, Leo let out a long breath. She's right, you know. If Grayson figures out that you're not just a drifter, but a very capable threat, he'll unleash everything to crush you, and anyone who stands with you. Zoe considered that reality, the old familiar burn of danger rekindling in her gut. It won't be the first time I've been on someone's hit list, she said half to herself. They spent the morning tidying up the store, trying to restore some sense of normalcy. A few wary customers came and went, each casting uneasy glances at Zoe, noticing the battered shelves and bullet casings. None asked questions. People in Silver Butte had learned that curiosity could be lethal. Zoe went through the motions of stocking shelves, but her mind was churning with strategies. If the Reapers had ties to a larger cartel, they could have resources extending well beyond a dusty county line. That might mean advanced weaponry, high-tech surveillance, and serious backup. Later that afternoon, Zoe took a short break from the station, heading into the outskirts of Silver Butte. She wanted to get a feel for the place, observe the rhythms of daily life, and identify potential vantage points. Driving her motorcycle at a leisurely pace, she noted the deserted main street lined with sun-bleached storefronts, an old barber shop, a second-hand thrift store, and indeed George's Diner, where a few trucks were parked out front. In the distance, she spotted what must have been the old copper mine entrance, perched on a hillside like a silent sentinel from another time. Even from afar, she could see it had been repurposed. Large corrugated steel fences had been erected, and a security booth stood at the gate. A couple of figures in black jackets, likely Reapers, paced outside, rifles slung over their shoulders. The presence of armed guards was more than enough confirmation. Something very illegal was happening up there. Zoe's mind drifted momentarily to an earlier part of her life. Nights spent creeping through enemy compounds, sabotage missions that involved infiltration under the cloak of darkness. Could she replicate that here? Possibly, if she had the right intel and at least some backup. As she cruised back to the gas station, her phone buzzed, the burner Naomi had given her. She pulled over to check the message discreetly. It was from Naomi. Heard from Georgia. Truckers talk about unusual late-night movements at the mine. Might have a lead on next big shipment. Let's meet. Zoe felt a jolt of excitement. This was exactly the break they needed. She texted back a simple, "Where?" and minutes later got an address. A small motel on the edge of town. Zoe found Leo in the station's back office, going over his stock inventory. "Got a lead," she informed him. "Naomi wants to meet." He arched an eyebrow. "You sure that's safe? The Reapers could be watching her." Zoe nodded. "We'll be cautious. Meeting spot's a quiet motel. Maybe we'll learn something that can help us plan." Arming herself with a compact sidearm and a folding knife, concealed but quickly accessible, Zoe set out for the motel just after dusk. She took winding back roads instead of the main street, reducing the chance of being tailed. The neon sign of the Desert Dawn Motel flickered in and out, painting the cracked parking lot in lurid pink and yellow. She spotted Naomi's cruiser parked discreetly near the back. Slipping off her helmet, Zoe scanned the perimeter. A single flickering light pole illuminated a cluster of cars. A few of them looked abandoned. The area was otherwise deserted. Naomi emerged from room 12, beckoning Zoe inside. "Rooms paid in cash," she explained softly as she closed the door. "No official record of me being here." Zoe took in the simple furnishings. A single bed, a battered dresser, and curtains drawn tight. On a small table lay a street map of Silver Butte, along with scattered notes and photographs. Naomi pointed to a photograph showing a large black SUV at night, parked near the mine's entrance. "Georgia said a trucker friend claims these SUVs show up every couple of nights. He overheard one of the Reapers bragging about moving live cargo." "Live cargo," Zoe repeated, her stomach twisting. The phrase could mean many things, but in her experience, it often pointed to human trafficking. She steadied herself, thinking of all the missions overseas where she had encountered similarly grim euphemisms. Naomi nodded, face somber. "I suspect the mine's tunnels have become a transit point for people being smuggled across state lines, or worse, across borders. Every time I try to dig into it, the sheriff shuts me down." Zoe examined another photograph, a grainy image of a loading bay near the mine's side entrance. Men in Reapers' jackets were guiding women with vacant expressions onto a truck. The image was blurry, taken from a distance, but it told a horrifying tale. "This is bigger than local corruption," Zoe said. "This is the kind of thing that, if proven, would bring in federal agencies immediately. But we need incontrovertible evidence." Naomi tapped the map where she had circled the perimeter of the old copper mine. "Based on what truckers have told Georgia, the next major movement is in 2 nights. Reapers will escort a convoy of SUVs after midnight. I don't have the manpower to stage a bust, and if I call for help locally, Grayson will sabotage the operation. But if we can get photographic or video evidence of them loading victims, maybe we can get a direct line to the feds." Zoe considered the plan, adrenaline already coursing. She looked out the motel window at the dim neon sign. "What about the approach? They have watchers on the main road. We can't just drive up. We'd be spotted well before we get in range." Naomi tapped another part of the map, an old service route winding through the hills. "This used to be a mining road. It's mostly collapsed, but rumor is there's a footpath that still leads up to an abandoned ventilation shaft. If we can get close enough, we can observe from high ground." From her vantage overseas, Zoe had done infiltration from air, sea, and land. Scaling a back route through the desert hills was more in line with a specialized reconnaissance mission, minus the support of a large team. She nodded slowly. "It's doable. We'll need night vision optics, decent cameras, and possibly a drone if you have one that can operate quietly." Naomi grimaced. "My department budget is laughable, and anything high-tech is likely monitored by Grayson. I might scrounge up a basic night vision monocular and a cheap camera, but it's not enough." Zoe pursed her lips. This is where she weighed her reluctance. She did have a connection or two that could supply the necessary gear, old teammates who worked in the private security sector. But once she reached out, there'd be no going back. They'd know she was involved in some clandestine stateside operation. Still, the thought of letting this trafficking ring persist was intolerable. "I might have a way," Zoe said finally, pulling out her phone. "Give me 24 hours. I can get better equipment. Hush, hush." Naomi's eyes held gratitude tinged with worry. "Just be careful who you trust." Zoe nodded. "Always." She looked again at the photographs of frightened, huddled women being herded like cattle. A dull rage simmered inside her. This was exactly why she had joined the Navy Special Operations in the first place, to protect the vulnerable. Now, ironically, she was back on home soil fighting the same kind of evil she'd seen overseas. "We'll do this," Zoe said quietly, her tone resolute, "and we'll do it right." Under the cover of darkness, Zoe rode back to Henderson's Gas and Repair, every sense tingling with heightened alert. She parked her bike behind the building, letting herself in through a side door. Leo was dozing lightly on a makeshift cot near the back office. He jolted awake at the sound of her footsteps. "Everything okay?" he asked, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Zoe nodded. "Naomi's lead is promising but risky. She wants to get proof of human cargo being moved through the mine in 2 nights. She paused, studying Leo's reaction. The idea of messing with the Reapers again, especially in their stronghold, would unnerve anyone. But Leo merely let out a tired sigh. "I'm in if you need me. Not sure how much help I'll be with my bum knee, but I can at least watch your back from a distance." Despite the seriousness of the moment, Zoe offered a small, appreciative smile. "I won't drag you into the field, but maybe you can help with a plan. Naomi has a route, but gear is an issue. She only has a basic night vision scope, and we need better equipment to document the operation." Leo grunted. "I might know a guy in Phoenix who deals with second-hand military surplus. Some legit, some not. He helped me get the guns I have stashed. If that's something you can work with." Zoe considered it. "Could be. I also have a contact who owes me a favor. Might be able to get a discreet drop of specialized gear. But traveling back and forth to Phoenix is probably safer than using my old channels for a direct shipment here. We don't want to leave a paper trail that leads the Reapers or Grayson right to us." Another wave of memory washed over Zoe. She recalled the covert ops in the Middle East, where supply lines had to be masked constantly to avoid tipping off insurgents. Now the same tactics were being applied in her home country. It was sobering. By the time they finished discussing logistics, the first glow of dawn was creeping in. Rather than try to sleep, Zoe hopped on her bike and sped down the highway to Phoenix before the rest of Silver Butte stirred awake. The ride took over 2 hours, the desert landscape unfurling under a rising sun that shimmered on the horizon. She made her way into the industrial outskirts of the city, where old warehouses and repair shops cluttered the landscape. Parking near an unmarked warehouse, Zoe approached a steel door and rapped in a specific rhythm. A slot slid open, and suspicious eyes peered out. Moments later, the door opened to reveal a burly man with a bushy beard and tattoos crawling down both arms. Carter was the name she knew him by, though she doubted it was real. He recognized her immediately. "Harrington," he greeted in a low, gravelly voice. "Haven't seen you since—" Zoe cut him off. "Got a job. Need some gear. Night vision, thermal if you have it, plus a decent camera. All untraceable." Carter stroked his beard, stepping aside to let her enter. Crates were stacked high along the walls. Some contained engine parts, others appeared to hold electronics. She'd always wondered how he managed to straddle the line between legal and illicit deals. But Carter never asked questions about her missions, and in return, she never pried into his supply chains. "I can set you up," he said, rummaging through a crate near the back. "Pricey, though?" Zoe had come prepared. She pulled a black duffel from her bike's storage compartment, dropping it at Carter's feet with a heavy thud. Inside was a collection of crisp bills she'd withdrawn from multiple accounts under pseudonyms, money she'd saved for a rainy day. Carter whistled low. "All right, this'll cover it," he said, tipping his head in respect. He systematically laid out the equipment on a metal table. A used but functional PVS-14 monocular, a thermal scope with moderate resolution, and a surprisingly advanced digital camera with a high-zoom lens. Zoe tested the camera's functionality, making sure the memory card slot was intact and there were no hidden trackers. Satisfied, she gave Carter a nod. "Thanks," she said. "I appreciate your discretion." Carter shrugged. "Your business is your own. If anyone comes snooping, I don't even know you." Zoe cracked a grim smile. That was exactly what she needed. Loading the gear onto her bike, she secured everything carefully, aware that a single crash could destroy their best chance at gathering evidence. She also purchased a few boxes of ammunition for Leo's stash, hollow points and full metal jacket. giving them some options if things escalated to a firefight. After a brief farewell, she pulled out of the warehouse district, weaving through Phoenix's dusty back roads until she hit the open highway again. On her way back, Zoe stopped at an out-of-the-way diner, more for the chance to gather her thoughts than to grab a meal. She ordered a coffee and settled into a booth, eyes scanning every new customer who walked in. Old habits died hard. She was constantly on guard for potential threats. The encounter with Reaper and his men had reminded her just how quickly trouble could strike. As she stirred sugar into the coffee, her mind replayed scenes from previous missions. Nighttime raids in foreign deserts, infiltration behind enemy lines, the moment a door crashed open under the force of breaching charges. This time, though, the mission was personal in a way she didn't fully understand. Perhaps it was because the place she was defending was her own soil, her own people. Neighbors who shouldn't have to live under the thumb of gangsters and a corrupt sheriff. By late afternoon, she arrived back at Henderson's, finding Leo in the garage tinkering with an old pickup truck. The station was otherwise quiet. "Good haul?" Leo asked, wiping sweat from his brow. Zoe nodded, patting the black duffel on her shoulder. "Night vision, thermal, advanced camera. Enough to document what we need." She left the part about the cost unsaid. It didn't matter. Every cent was worth it if it meant saving lives. Leo pushed a rag into his back pocket. Naomi called. "She's finishing up her shift. Wanted to swing by tonight to finalize the plan." Zoe's stomach did a small flip of anticipation. They were truly moving forward with this. "Then let's set up a workspace in your back office. We'll need to test everything," she said. Together they cleared off an old wooden desk, pushing aside spare engine parts and oil cans. Zoe laid out the equipment like a quartermaster preparing for deployment. She explained each item's function to Leo, ensuring he could operate them in a pinch. She tested the camera's zoom on a cactus outside, verifying it could capture clear images in low light. Leo looked impressed, but also worried. The subtle lines of concern on his face said it all. If they were found in possession of such gear, it would paint a bullseye on them larger than they already had. Naomi arrived an hour later, sweaty and flushed from a long day in uniform. She slipped into the station with minimal fanfare, nodding at Leo before focusing on Zoe's gear spread out on the desk. "This is much more high-end than I expected," she admitted, a low whistle escaping her lips. "And if we get caught—" "We won't," Zoe interjected. "And if we do, we're just the public documenting possible illegal activity. We'll handle the rest." The unspoken truth, however, was that if they got caught sneaking around the mine, the Reapers wouldn't bother with an arrest or a trial. They huddled in the back office, a single lamp providing just enough light to read the map of the copper mine's perimeter. Naomi traced her fingertip along the old service route up the hillside. "It's washed out in parts, but I confirmed it's still passable on foot if we're careful. I'll park my cruiser well away from the area, so if anyone sees it, they'll assume I'm on a normal patrol." Zoe nodded, tapping a portion of the map that showed higher ground. "We could set up an observation post here. It's roughly 300 yards from the mine entrance. With the night vision and thermal scope, we can record the vehicles arriving. We'll catch them in the act if they load people into those SUVs." Leo frowned. 300 yards is still a ways off. What if they move the victims from deeper inside the tunnels or block the view with trucks? Zoe glanced at Naomi. "Then we adapt. But for a start, we'll capture footage of any suspicious movement. If we record enough to suggest kidnapping or forced transport, it should be enough for the feds to obtain warrants and to push out a bolo on those vehicles. The more coverage we have, the better. Once the Reapers realize we're onto them, we have a narrow window before they go underground or relocate." Naomi chewed on her lower lip. "And if they're armed to the teeth, which they likely are, we can't risk a direct confrontation. Even with your skills," she said, nodding to Zoe. "We're talking about multiple heavily armed gang members. If you're pinned down in those hills, there's no easy escape." Zoe acknowledged the concern. "That's why stealth is our best weapon. We'll bring basic firearms for self-defense. But the main objective is to observe and gather evidence. If it turns into a firefight, we're already off script." She paused, letting the gravity of the situation sink in. They were gambling their lives on this plan. One mistake could mean a bullet in the dark or a missing persons poster pinned to the local diner's notice board. Leo broke the silence by offering them each a mug of coffee. We'll have to do this in shifts, right? You can't stay up there all night without relief. Naomi nodded, swirling the coffee absent-mindedly. I can't be there the whole time. The sheriff expects me on duty at certain hours, but I might be able to patrol the area at key intervals. It'll be suspicious if I'm seen, though. Zoe's mind churned through potential solutions. We should also consider an escape route. Once we're done filming, we'll need to exfiltrate quietly, probably through this dry creek bed on the backside of the hill. We park a secondary vehicle there, something inconspicuous. Leo nodded. I've got an old Jeep with tinted windows. Been meaning to get rid of it, but it still runs. Might be perfect for a stealth getaway, assuming it doesn't break down halfway. Finally, after ironing out details for nearly 2 hours, they arrived at a workable plan. Naomi would conveniently schedule her patrol near the mine the following night, ensuring she was too busy to respond if any of the Reapers reported suspicious activity in that specific area. Zoe and Leo would deploy to the hillside with the specialized gear, set up the observation post, and capture whatever footage they could of the next big movement. Then they'd rendezvous at a safe location to analyze the evidence. If it was as damning as they believed, Naomi would initiate contact with the nearest federal field office. With the plan in place, Zoe walked Naomi to the door. The deputy looked at her with equal parts respect and trepidation. You sure you're up for this? You're just one person, and these men are ruthless. Zoe met her gaze head-on, her voice unyielding. I've been outnumbered before. The difference is I've got the element of surprise and the moral high ground. That counts for something in my book. Naomi nodded, a hint of a smile touching her lips. All right, Captain Harrington. Tomorrow night, we roll the dice. The day before the operation dawned hot and windy in Silver Butte. The wind whistled through the sun-baked streets, sweeping up small twisters of dust that disappeared just as quickly as they formed. Over at Henderson's Gas and Repair, Zoe Harrington paced near the small back office, mentally running through the steps of the nighttime mission. Across the counter, Leo Henderson finished loading the newly acquired gear into a sturdy backpack. The battered desk next to him was spread with notes, maps, and half-empty coffee cups. Deputy Naomi Garcia had called earlier, discreetly confirming that the sheriff was too focused on other matters to question her daily patrol route. She sounded cautiously optimistic. It seemed Sheriff Grayson had bought into her cover story of investigating car theft suspects at the far side of the county. That would be her alibi to circle the abandoned service roads near the old copper mine. It was a nerve-wracking dance of half-truths, but Naomi knew exactly how to placate a corrupt boss. He wanted plausible deniability if things got messy, which ironically gave Naomi the freedom she needed. Zoe double-checked the functionality of the thermal scope Carter had sold her. The device was heavier than the monocular, but it offered greater clarity in total darkness, key for documenting any people or vehicles moving around the mine after midnight. She also inspected the advanced camera, popping in a fresh memory card and ensuring the battery was fully charged. The tension in her muscles coiled like a spring as she counted and recounted the gear. Though she wasn't new to stealth missions, this was different. There was no official chain of command backing her, no extraction plan orchestrated by a larger team. Here it was just her and a handful of allies against a biker gang with suspected cartel ties. Leo's voice interrupted her thoughts. I'm going to drive my old Jeep over to that vantage point we talked about, he said, pulling keys from his pocket. I'll leave it in the dry creek bed, hidden behind some rocks. If everything goes right, you can use it to slip out quietly once you've got the footage. Zoe paused, a note of gratitude in her expression. That'll be a huge help, but be careful. If any of the Reapers see you snooping around, we'll lose the element of surprise. Leo pursed his lips in a half-smile. I've avoided worse situations. At least here, we know who the bad guys are. With that, he hefted the backpack and headed out to the station's garage. Zoe took a moment to center herself. She remembered her final year in the Navy, those frenetic last months filled with top-secret ops in places she never wanted to revisit. She'd hoped to find some respite after leaving that life, maybe a shot at normalcy. Yet here she was again, about to infiltrate hostile territory. The difference this time was that the battleground was her own home soil, and the civilians she was defending were neighbors, not strangers. Her gaze slid to the front window, which overlooked the highway leading to Silver Butte's modest downtown. A dust plume trailed along the road. A lone car sped by, heading toward the outskirts. Probably someone who wanted to escape the town's tension for a weekend. For a fleeting moment, Zoe considered what it would be like to simply ride out of town and never look back. But that urge clashed violently with her sense of duty. She set her jaw, ignoring the temptation. There was too much at stake. Night fell slowly, as if reluctant to surrender the desert to darkness. The temperature dropped, the wind died down, and the hush of impending events settled over the town. Zoe and Naomi planned to meet at a discreet bend in the road near the old service route. Zoe had the camera, thermal scope, and a small sidearm holstered under her jacket. Naomi arrived in her patrol cruiser 15 minutes late, a minor tactic to avoid suspicion in case anyone was watching her movements. The hush of the desert amplified every sound. The low rumble of Naomi's engine, the crunch of gravel under Zoe's boots, the distant rustle of a desert fox or coyote. When Naomi stepped out, she was in uniform, but she looked tense. "Grayson cornered me in the hall today," she said quietly, her eyes scanning the horizon. "He was asking a lot of questions about your whereabouts, where you might be staying, if I'd seen you." She gave a dry laugh, though there was little humor in it. "I told him you took off after last night's dust-up with the Reapers and hadn't been seen since." Zoe's heart thumped. "Is he suspicious?" Naomi shrugged, her expression grim. "He's paranoid by nature, so yes, probably. But at least he's not rallying the entire department to hunt you down. He's more interested in covering up anything that could lead the feds here. That means he's less likely to start a public manhunt." Taking a quick look around, Zoe hoisted her backpack and nodded. "Let's not waste any more time." Naomi agreed, climbing back into the driver's seat. She'd drive ahead, making a slow loop around the mine's perimeter road, while Zoe would approach on foot from the old service trail. If Naomi spotted any heavy Reaper presence or unusual patrol, she'd radio in a coded message. If all was clear, she'd park discreetly, kill the lights, and wait for Zoe to signal that she'd set up her observation post. With that, the operation began in earnest. Naomi eased her cruiser forward, headlights low. Zoe jogged off into the darkness, following a faint path of packed dirt that wound around sagging fences and stray boulders. Each step felt surreal, as if she were reenacting past missions thousands of miles away. But here, every juniper bush and cactus reminded her she was still in the American Southwest, battling a threat that felt foreign yet alarmingly close to home. She moved carefully, mindful that the Sable Reapers might have posted their own guards. Rumors abounded of them deploying small drones for perimeter checks, so Zoe kept her ears peeled for any telltale buzz in the air. So far, only the chirping of nocturnal insects filled her ears. After about half a mile, she saw the dim silhouette of a ridge rising to her left. This was the vantage point Naomi had marked. Scrambling up the rocky slope, Zoe found a small outcrop of stone that overlooked the mine's main entrance. Sure enough, there it was, the newly refurbished guard station, erected near the old chain-link gate. Two men in black Reapers' jackets loitered there, rifles visible in the ambient glow of a single floodlight. A battered truck was parked behind them. Beyond the gate stood a broader complex, storage sheds, stacked shipping containers, and rusting conveyor belts from the mine's original operations. A winding ramp led down into the deep tunnels. Zoe's pulse quickened. This was exactly the place they needed to document. Zoe lay flat on her belly, using the outcrop's natural formations for cover. She slid the camera out of her pack, fitting it with the telephoto lens. When she peered through the viewfinder, she could make out details she couldn't see with the naked eye. Patches on the men's jackets, the makeshift barricade of pallets near the guard booth, even the scuffed plates on that old truck. She recorded short clips of the men pacing around, occasionally checking their phones or scanning the perimeter with flashlights. Nothing conclusive yet, but every bit of footage could help build a case. Her attention drifted to the mine's mouth. Floodlights lit the immediate entrance, though not brightly enough to expose the deeper corridors. A tangle of machinery and rusted scaffolding formed a partial barrier. If they were smuggling people, they'd likely keep them deeper inside, away from prying eyes. She switched to the thermal scope, scanning the area. The two guards glowed white-hot against the cooler background. No one else was visible above ground. A faint crackle of static made Zoe's stomach lurch. Her comlink with Naomi. She pressed the earpiece, careful to keep her voice low. "Go ahead," she whispered. Naomi's voice came through in a breathy hush. Saw a small convoy heading your way on the main road. 3 bikes, 2 SUVs behind them. They turned off onto the gravel approach. ETA, maybe 5 minutes. Zoe's adrenaline spiked. Copy that. I'm in position, she said. This was the best lead they had. A midnight delivery of live cargo, if rumors were to be believed. She checked the camera's angle, ensuring she had a clear line of sight to the gate. She also activated the thermal scope's recording feature, just in case the darkness was too thick for the standard camera. If they had any chance of nailing the Reapers for human trafficking, they'd need footage of actual victims being moved. The next few minutes stretched out like a taut wire, every second tinged with tension. Finally, headlights appeared, bobbing along the uneven road. First came the 3 motorcycles, their engines echoing across the rocky terrain. Then the SUVs rumbled into view, large and menacing, with tinted windows that concealed their occupants. Zoe's grip tightened on the camera, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. At the gate, the guards swung into action, opening it with rushed efficiency. The lead bike pulled in, followed by the SUVs, which rumbled to a stop. Zoe adjusted her focus, filming everything. One of the bikers, maybe a higher-ranking Reaper, hopped off and conferred with the guards. Zoe couldn't make out the words, but the body language was tense. One SUV's rear door opened. Her camera's lens zoomed in, capturing a glimpse of someone inside, a figure huddled, possibly in fear. Then another. Zoe's stomach twisted with a flash of rage and sorrow. She could see human silhouettes, at least 2, maybe more. They were pushed out of the vehicle by unseen hands. The captives stumbled onto the gravel, disoriented. Even from her distant vantage, Zoe sensed their terror. One guard prodded them toward the mine entrance with the barrel of his rifle. One captive, a young woman, looked as if she was about to collapse before the guard yanked her upright. It was all Zoe could do to remain still. Every instinct told her to intervene, to take out the guards and free these people. But she knew that would doom the mission. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and had no immediate backup. Gathering evidence was their priority. Her hands trembled with the weight of inaction as she continued recording. Within minutes, the vehicles dispersed. The SUVs backed up and maneuvered into a larger parking area, while the bikers parked by a side fence. The captives, at least half a dozen of them, most appearing women, but a couple men too, were led toward a dimly lit pathway that vanished into the mine's cavernous depths. A flicker of recognition sparked in Zoe's mind. That route must lead to one of the deeper tunnels, likely repurposed for clandestine holding or transport. The Reapers had clearly made the mine into a multi-tiered fortress. Zoe kept filming, capturing every detail. The Reapers' harsh commands, the loaded weapons, the blank or terrified looks on the captives' faces. Each frame felt like a stab to her conscience, but it also fueled her conviction. These were the very people the Reapers were moving, presumably for sale or forced labor. The rumor of live cargo had proven heartbreakingly true. Her comlink crackled again. Zoe, it's Naomi. I've circled around. I can see the gate from the other side, but I'm pinned by a Reaper on a small ATV doing perimeter checks. I'll hold position. Do you need extraction? Zoe's voice was tight with emotion as she replied, Negative. I'm getting solid evidence. The Reapers are taking about half a dozen captives inside. Naomi's hissed curse was audible even through the static. Stay put and get out safe. The moment you're clear, we contact the feds. This is definitely enough to bring them in. As the last captive disappeared into the mine, some of the Reapers lingered around the entrance, lighting cigarettes and chatting. This gave Zoe more time to capture identifying details, leather cuts bearing personal monikers, identifiable tattoos, and in the case of one older man, distinctive facial scars. The Reapers had no clue they were being recorded from the shadows above. 20 grueling minutes passed before the group at the entrance finally moved out of sight, heading deeper underground. Zoe eased off the camera, her mind churned with the next steps. Pack up gear, rendezvous with Naomi, and exfiltrate. She carefully checked her surroundings through the thermal scope. No sign of roving patrols directly on her hillside, but a low mechanical hum to her east caught her attention. She swiveled, searching for the source. The red glow of a small drone buzzed about 100 yards away, scanning the desert floor. It was sweeping in wide arcs, presumably part of the Reaper's security measure. Damn, she whispered. If that drone drifted too close, her silhouette or heat signature might be discovered on the ridge. She couldn't just hunker down and hope it missed her. Carefully, she flicked off the camera's power and stowed the thermal scope. She'd have to move, silently and quickly, down the backside of the ridge. The drone was creeping closer, a faint whir signifying it was scanning with some camera or night vision system of its own. Zoe inched backward, pressing her body flush against the rocky surface. Then, with calculated speed, she crawled down the slope, keeping boulders between herself and the drone. Every footstep required total precision, placing her boots and hands on stable rock so she wouldn't send pebbles rolling. Her heart hammered in her chest as the mechanical hum grew slightly louder, then shifted away. The angle of approach changed, and the drone began moving in the opposite direction. Breathing a silent sigh of relief, she continued her descent until she reached level ground. Now she had to skirt around the mine's perimeter to the dry creek bed, where Leo's old Jeep was stashed. Naomi's cruiser was nowhere in sight, a good sign that the deputy hadn't been forced to blow her cover. Zoe set off at a cautious jog, scanning for any roving guards on foot or ATV. The desert night was at once vast and claustrophobic. The horizon stretched endlessly beneath a quilt of stars, yet Zoe felt hemmed in by threats lurking at every turn. The dryness in her throat wasn't just from the arid climate. It was from the tension of having caught undeniable proof of human trafficking. This mission had succeeded in capturing the evidence, but now came the most dangerous part: getting away with it. Her route took her around a cluster of large boulders that formed a shallow ravine. This was where Leo said he'd hide the Jeep. Sure enough, Zoe spotted the faint outline of the vehicle's roof behind some sagebrush. She paused, scanning with both the naked eye and the night vision monocular. No sign of watchers. The drone's distant hum had receded to a faint buzz, far on the other side of the mine. Satisfied, she approached the Jeep, removing a tarp Leo had used to cloak it. The battered vehicle was unlocked, with keys tucked under the driver's seat. She climbed in gingerly, mindful of squeaky hinges. The Jeep's interior smelled of old canvas and stale gasoline. She winced, hoping the engine wouldn't roar too loudly in the still air. With a quick exhale, she turned the key. The engine coughed, sputtered, then settled into a low, rough idle. She let it run for a few seconds, adrenaline peaking, as she listened for any sign that the noise had drawn attention. Nothing stirred. Easing the Jeep into gear, Zoe navigated carefully down the creek bed. The dried-out channel twisted around low hills and tangles of scrub. Shadows stretched under the moonlight, creating illusions of dips and drop-offs. She kept one hand steady on the wheel, the other on her holstered pistol, in case a Reaper guard appeared out of nowhere. Each turn felt precarious, but she eventually found the spot where the creek bed crossed a dirt service road that looped around Silver Butte. Though the plan called for Naomi to meet her at a safe point near an old windmill, Zoe was still on edge. She turned onto the dirt road, proceeding at a snail's pace to minimize dust clouds. If the Reapers discovered fresh tire tracks or heard the Jeep's engine, they might send a pursuit team. She forced herself to stay calm, to recall the breathing exercises that had helped her during high-stress situations overseas. Inhale for 4 counts, hold, exhale for 4 counts. 15 nerve-wracking minutes later, the battered windmill came into view, its metal blades glinting faintly. Parked in its shadow was Naomi's cruiser, lights off. Zoe pulled in behind a scraggly row of mesquite trees and cut the Jeep's engine. The silence that followed felt almost deafening. She rolled her shoulders, trying to unclench the knots of tension in her muscles. Naomi stepped out of the cruiser, her flashlight angled toward the ground so it wouldn't blind Zoe. "You made it," she breathed, relief coloring her words. "Any trouble?" Zoe shook her head. "Just a near run-in with their drone. But I got footage." Shri. She patted the pack with the camera and scope. Naomi exhaled hard, running a hand through her hair. "Thank God. Let's see it." They moved to the cruiser's trunk, where Naomi had set up a portable laptop. Zoe fished out the memory cards and inserted them. Moments later, the screen displayed clips of the SUVs arriving, the captives being forced out, the rifle-toting guards. Naomi's expression turned grim, her jaw set in anger. It's even worse than I imagined," she muttered. "But it's exactly what we need." Zoe leaned against the side of the car, arms folded. So what's the next move? We have enough to bring the feds in, but how do we call them without the sheriff intercepting our communication? Naomi pursed her lips. We'll have to do it directly. There's a federal field office in Tucson. I know an agent there who isn't in Grayson's pocket, but we have to be sure Grayson can't sabotage us in the meantime. Zoe's gaze hardened. Then we move fast. Tonight, if possible. They decided Naomi would personally drive the evidence to Tucson. By morning, she'd be seated across from an agent with the DEA or Homeland Security, laying out the entire case. Zoe, meanwhile, would go back to Henderson's gas and repair with the gear. Once the feds took over, they'd likely coordinate an official raid on the mine. With luck, the entire Sable Reapers network would be toppled, and Sheriff Grayson exposed for his collusion. Naomi handed Zoe a small slip of paper. That's the number for Agent Marta Ellison with Homeland Security Investigations. She's someone I trust. If anything goes wrong, call her directly. Zoe nodded, pocketing the note. Got it. You be careful on your drive. The Reapers might have watchers on the highway. Naomi gave a tight smile. I'll take the back roads and swap my cruiser for an unmarked unit I keep stashed for just this reason. Grayson will think I'm still on my shift in Silver Butte. By the time he realizes I'm gone, it'll be too late. With that, she climbed into her cruiser, turned the ignition, and pulled away without headlights. The darkness swallowed her up in moments. Zoe lingered for a second, scanning the horizon. The nighttime stillness felt surreal compared to the violent revelation she just recorded. A half-dozen innocent lives, maybe more, were being trafficked in those mine tunnels. She wanted to do more, to storm in with a rescue op. But she knew that would put those captives in even greater danger if done prematurely. The rational part of her mind insisted that the right call was to wait for federal backup. Still, it gnawed at her that each passing moment left those people in terror. With a sigh, Zoe returned to Leo's Jeep. The vehicle sputtered to life again, and she navigated it onto the winding dirt road that would eventually lead back to the gas station. She replayed the events of the night in her mind, scanning for any mistakes. Had she been too slow in packing up? Had she accidentally left any footprints or tire tracks that the Reapers could trace? The tension wouldn't leave her until she was back behind closed doors. Her nerves eased slightly upon spotting the familiar neon sign of Henderson's from a quarter-mile out. She parked behind the station, where the shadows masked the Jeep. Once inside, she found Leo dozing in a chair, a half-eaten sandwich on the table next to him. The moment she stepped into the room, he startled awake, reaching for his shotgun. Zoe raised her hands in a calming gesture. It's me, she whispered. He exhaled in relief. So? He asked, wiping sleep from his eyes. Did you get it? Zoe pulled the memory card from her jacket pocket. We got them on camera, forcing people out of SUVs at gunpoint. Naomi's heading to Tucson right now to deliver the footage to a federal contact. Leo's eyes shone with a blend of pride and dread. Thank God. That's the best shot we've got. You think the feds will swoop in soon? Zoe nodded. That's the hope. But we need to prepare in case the Reapers or the sheriff realize what's happening. If they get wind that a federal raid is coming, they might launch an attack on the town or try to destroy evidence. The enormity of the possibility weighed on them. Silver Butte was small, with limited law enforcement if you excluded Grayson's corrupt deputies. The Reapers, on the other hand, had manpower and, as far as they knew, a direct pipeline to some larger criminal network. If cornered, they'd likely fight like caged animals. Zoe gave Leo a meaningful look. We should warn the people we trust to stay low, she said quietly. This might get ugly. Morning broke with a piercing orange sunrise that did nothing to chase away the tension. Zoe had managed only a few hours of restless sleep in the station's cramped back office. She roused herself with a splash of water to the face in the dingy restroom, then found Leo in the shop area, already serving a handful of customers who were pumping gas or grabbing coffee. It struck Zoe how normal life went on, oblivious to the explosive events unfolding beneath the surface. While Leo rang up a couple of ranchers, Zoe lingered by the door, scanning the highway for any sign of Reapers. The gang often rode in pairs or trios, sometimes flaunting their territory by circling the downtown strip. She saw no motorcycles. Perhaps they were holed up in the mine after last night's operation. Or maybe they were out in the desert, doubling down on security after suspecting infiltration. There was no way to be sure. By the time the last customer drove off, Zoe approached Leo. "No word from Naomi yet?" He shook his head. "None, but she said it might be midday before she reached her contact in Tucson." He lowered his voice. "How about you get some proper rest now? I can handle the station." Zoe opened her mouth to protest, but exhaustion was a living weight on her shoulders. She nodded. "Maybe just a little while." She dozed on an old recliner in the back. Her dreams were fractured nightmares. Images of the mine, that young woman forced at gunpoint, her own reflection in a desert mirror. She jerked awake more than once, heart pounding as if she'd been running. Finally, she gave up on sleep and returned to the front, only to find Leo standing with a middle-aged woman sporting a green apron. Georgia Hill, owner of Georgia's Diner. She looked frightened, her hands twisting nervously at her waist. "Zoe," Leo said in hushed tones, "Georgia says the Reapers have been asking around about last night's newcomers. They're trying to find out who might have filmed them." Georgia's voice was trembling. "A few of them showed up at my diner this morning, pushing me to talk. They're certain someone is stirring trouble. I played dumb, but they're not convinced." She looked at Zoe with apprehension. "They've already threatened a couple of my waitresses, demanding any info on suspicious strangers." Zoe grimaced. She hadn't expected word to spread so quickly. "We need to keep you safe, Georgia. If they figure out you've been helping Naomi with leads, they'll come after you." Georgia nodded, eyes wide. "I have family in the next county. I'm thinking of taking a vacation, but I didn't want to run without warning Leo and the others." Zoe patted her on the shoulder. "Go. Take your people and keep your heads down until this is over. We'll try to handle things here." Georgia left in a hurry, and Zoe turned to Leo, her jaw set. "It's starting. They're sniffing around. The longer it takes for the feds to get here, the more time the Reapers have to intimidate or eliminate potential witnesses." Leo swallowed hard. "Then we stand by the plan. If Naomi's contact is legit, we'll have federal agents swarming the mine soon." Zoe nodded, her heart pounding. "I just hope it's in time." She spent the next hour making a mental checklist of everything they might need if the Reapers decided to strike the gas station again. Ammo, medical supplies, water, flashlights. Her mind drifted to the well-worn routines of a soldier preparing for a siege. Every fiber of her being hummed with the readiness to defend this small patch of ground. Because the moment Reaper or Sheriff Grayson caught wind of their involvement, it would be war. The noon sun bore down mercilessly, and Zoe found herself outside, hauling crates of supplies to reinforce the building's interior walls. Leo was on the phone, presumably with a friend who might be able to smuggle him extra boards or sandbags. They were preparing for the worst-case scenario, a frontal assault on Henderson's Gas and Repair. As Zoe secured a row of wooden boards against a window, a metallic gleam flashed from the highway. Her pulse spiked. She crouched, scanning the road. A single black SUV slowed near the station, tinted windows giving no hint of who was inside. It idled for a moment, then rolled on by. Zoe guessed it might be one of the Reapers' unmarked vehicles. They usually preferred motorcycles, but for bigger jobs or intimidation tours, they sometimes used SUVs. "They're watching us," she thought grimly. The knowledge of being under surveillance tightened the knot of anxiety in her gut. She ducked back inside and updated Leo. He nodded, face drawn. "Nothing we can do about it now, but stay alert. If they come, we'll be ready." He held up his cell phone. "I'm trying to get hold of a few folks I trust. Old vets, local ranchers who hate the gang. Maybe we can form a small watch group." Zoe frowned. "Careful. Any big movement of people to the station might tip them off that we're preparing an attack." Their debate was cut short by the ring of Zoe's burner phone. She snatched it up, anxiety and hope warring inside her. "Hello!" A crackle of static, then Naomi's voice. "Zoe, it's me. I ran into complications. I'm okay, but Grayson found out I left the county and tried to chase me down. I had to ditch the cruiser. I'm driving a borrowed vehicle now." Zoe's heart thudded. "Were you able to meet your contact?" Naomi hesitated. "Yes. Agent Ellison has the footage. She's mobilizing a small task force, but it'll take time. Maybe 12 to 24 hours for them to coordinate. They'll need a solid plan to raid the mine, especially if it's heavily armed. Ellison said she wants to coordinate with local law enforcement, But I told her no way to trust Grayson. Zoe squeezed her eyes shut in frustration. Time we might not have. The Reapers are already sniffing around. If they suspect an impending raid, they might move or kill the captives before the feds can act. Naomi's voice caught. I know. I told Ellison we can't wait. She promised to expedite, but bureaucracy is bureaucracy. She took a deep breath. I'm heading back to Silver Butte in this borrowed sedan. Grayson has put out a bogus APB on me, claiming I stole department property. If any deputy sees me, they'll try to arrest. Or worse. Zoe glanced at Leo, who had heard enough to piece together the situation. She directed her reply into the phone. Lie low until nightfall, then come to the station. We'll figure out what to do. If the feds are delayed, we might have to stage a rescue ourselves. Naomi's sharp intake of breath signaled just how dangerous that plan sounded. Understood. I'll call you when I'm close. With that, she ended the call. Leo exhaled shakily. A rescue op inside that mine would be suicide, Zoe. She nodded grimly. I know, but we can't let them start moving those captives again or, God forbid, kill them to cover their tracks. They stood in silence, the reality sinking in. Zoe had always been trained to wait for the right moment, to rely on her team's strategic advantage. But here, with the closest thing she had to a team scattered or hamstrung by corruption, she might have to do the unthinkable. Engage a heavily armed gang in their own territory, severely outnumbered. As the afternoon waned, Zoe and Leo fortified the gas station further. They moved shelves to create barricades, taped cardboard over windows to reduce visibility from the outside, and placed additional weapons and ammo caches in corners. Even if it never came to a last stand, they wanted every advantage. The desert seemed to hold its breath, the sun's rays slowly melting into a purple-orange horizon. Around dusk, Zoe received a text from Naomi. 1 hour, watch for me on side road. She showed it to Leo, who nodded and grabbed his shotgun. They agreed they'd let Naomi slip in through the garage, away from prying eyes. With Reapers likely watching the main highway, any direct approach to the station risked detection. Sure enough, about an hour later, Zoe heard the rumble of an older sedan, engine laboring as it pulled onto the gravel behind Henderson's. She peered out, saw Naomi stepping out, and hurried to open the garage door. The deputy looked drained but resolute. I parked behind those abandoned crates. Couldn't see any headlights following me, Naomi said, her voice hushed. I think I lost them. Inside the station, Naomi updated them on her meeting with Agent Ellison. She's assembling a small strike team, DEA, Homeland Security, maybe some state police who aren't compromised. They'll likely come in with armored vehicles and air support. Best case scenario, they arrive tomorrow night. Worst case, they're 2 days out. Zoe frowned, leaning over a makeshift map laid atop Leo's desk. Even one extra day might be too late. The Reapers could move the captives tonight. Naomi's gaze shifted to Zoe. That's why I wanted to come back. If we get intel that they're moving them, we can't just sit around. I'd never forgive myself if we let them disappear. Zoe pursed her lips, her mind drifting to all the operations she'd planned in less time with fewer resources. You, me, Leo, and maybe a couple of ranchers who want to help. Do we have enough to mount a quick infiltration if necessary? Leo swallowed hard, exchanging a look with Naomi. Well, I do know a few folks. There's Travis Eddings, ex-Army, runs a cattle spread south of town. There's also Martha Lynn, served as a Marine in the Gulf. She's the county veterinarian, but she can shoot. They both hate the Reapers for what they've done. We'd have at least a handful of trained shooters. Naomi nodded. That's something, though we're still outgunned if the Reapers are all in that mine. We need the element of surprise and a specific objective: rescue the captives. We don't necessarily need to take down the entire gang ourselves. Zoe traced a line on the map from the mine entrance to a lesser-known side tunnel. She'd once seen a reference to it in old mining records. If we can enter through a less guarded tunnel, we might bypass the main security detail at the gate. We'd need someone to create a diversion, maybe an explosion or something, to draw the Reapers away from the captive's location. Naomi's eyes widened. You have explosives? Zoe let out a small grunt. I can rig something from basic supplies if we find the right flammable materials. Or if Carter and Phoenix can get me a small batch of C4 on short notice. Though that's risky. Leo set his shotgun down with a clunk, rubbing his temples. This is turning into a full-blown paramilitary op. We're just townsfolk. And you, Zoe, you're obviously trained, but is that enough? Zoe met his gaze. Maybe not, but it's better than letting the Reapers vanish with those people, or waiting helplessly until the feds arrive too late. We'll plan carefully and we'll only move if we confirm the Reapers are about to move the captives. They all fell silent, the weight of the decision pressing heavily on them. Finally, Naomi spoke, her voice scarcely above a whisper. We try to hold out for the feds, but if we get word, any word, that those people are being moved, we go. Agreed? Zoe and Leo nodded, sealing a pact that could very well mean life or death. Outside, the desert's endless night loomed, as if bracing for the storm. Hours later, the station was eerily quiet. Leo had drifted into a fitful doze on a cot behind the counter. Naomi hunched over the old desk, poring over county geological surveys and scrawling notes on potential mine shafts. Zoe, wide awake, was restless. She paced the aisles of the station, her mind bouncing between rescue strategies and worst-case scenarios. Part of her wanted to slip into the night, do a one-woman infiltration, but reason won out. Going solo was a surefire way to get killed, or, worse, to trigger a mass retaliation that would endanger the captives. Her phone buzzed, an encrypted message from an unknown number. She froze, then quickly answered. A male voice spoke, modulated slightly. Zoe, it's Carter. Heard some chatter through my channels. The Reapers have got a big transport scheduled tomorrow afternoon. A friend of mine in Glendale overheard a conversation about moving product by 3 p.m. This may be your people. Zoe's spine stiffened, adrenaline surging. Do you know the route? Carter hesitated. Not for sure, but they mentioned the old border crossing near the reservation. Could be they're taking them south. Look, I'm only calling because I owe you, but I can't get involved beyond this. Zoe swallowed. Thanks for the heads up. It's more than enough. She ended the call, mind reeling. If the Reapers planned a daytime transport, it gave them less time to coordinate. She hurried over to Naomi, who looked up from her notes in alarm. It's Carter, Zoe explained, voice clipped. He says the Reapers might move the product, likely those captives, tomorrow afternoon. Probably heading south toward the border. That's less than 12 hours from now. Naomi cursed under her breath. The feds won't be here in time. They're still forming that task force. If the Reapers get those people across state lines, there's no telling where they'll end up. Zoe nodded grimly. Then it's up to us. We either intercept them en route or stop them at the mine before they leave. Naomi pushed the surveys aside. Stopping them en route could be chaos. They'll have armed escorts and they'll be on public roads. Civilians could get caught in a crossfire. Then the mine, Zoe said. We hit them before they depart, rescue the captives, gather any leftover evidence to hand over to the feds. We only have one shot at this. Naomi's hands shook slightly. We'll need help, more than just Leo and me. We should call Travis Eddings, Martha Lynn, anyone else who won't run at the first sign of trouble. Zoe placed a hand on her shoulder. Yes, you gather them. I'll handle the infiltration plan. They roused Leo, who took the news stoically. So this is it, he said, sighing, as if he'd known all along it would come to this. All right, I'll call Travis and Martha right now. Within minutes, quiet phone calls were made. Both ranchers agreed to meet at Henderson Station before dawn. They sounded nervous but committed. Zoe suspected they'd seen enough of the Reapers' brutality to yearn for a final stand. Once the calls ended, Naomi eyed Zoe. What about weapons and gear? We have your night vision, the camera, a handful of rifles from Leo's stash, and whatever Travis and Martha bring. Zoe checked the time on her phone. Nearly 2 a.m. Let me see if Carter can supply any additional hardware on short notice, she said, heading to a quieter corner to make a call. If they were truly going in, they'd need every advantage they could get. Dawn broke on a scene reminiscent of a clandestine military briefing. Inside the gas station's back office, a small group huddled around a scarred wooden table. Travis Eddings, a lean man in his 50s with silver in his beard, wore a well-worn ranch jacket and a holstered revolver. Martha Lynn, in her 40s, stocky build, arms defined from years of wrangling animals, stood beside him, a hardened expression on her face. Both had that wary look of people who knew they were stepping over a dangerous line, facing not just criminals, but potentially corrupt law enforcement. Naomi cleared her throat. Thank you for coming. We have intel the Sable Reapers plan to move their captives around 3 p.m. today. That means they'll load the people from the mine into vehicles and head south. She laid out a map of the mine's layout, courtesy of the geological surveys, and pointed to a specific side tunnel. We believe this tunnel is less guarded. If we can breach it, we might bypass the main gate and get to the captives before they're moved. Travis peered at the map, tapping the tunnel's entry point. You sure it's accessible? Been years since the mine was operational. Zoe answered, we can't be 100% certain, but I see no reason the Reapers would block it completely. They use the mine's interior to move contraband. Even if there's a partial collapse, we might be able to clear a path with some basic explosives or heavy tools. At that, Martha gave a tight nod. I've got some dynamite stored for blowing up old stumps. Not a ton, but a few sticks left. Could that help? Zoe arched an eyebrow. Absolutely, but it has to be handled carefully. If we're not precise, we could bring the entire tunnel down. Leo rubbed his face. So our plan is to slip into the side tunnel, quietly take down any guards we meet, locate the captives, and get them out? Naomi interjected. Yes, and we must do it fast. The minute the Reapers sense an intrusion, they'll either retreat deeper with hostages or come in guns blazing. If we're pinned inside, we're done. Zoe took over. We'll split into 2 teams. Team A, Naomi, Martha, and me, will breach the side tunnel. Travis, Leo, you'll be Team B, creating a distraction near the front gate. Shoot out tires, maybe toss some dynamite at an unmanned spot to draw attention. Nothing that puts you at risk of direct firefight with the entire gang. Travis grimaced but agreed. Understood. We'll cause a ruckus and then get the hell out. Looking at each of them, Zoe felt a pang in her chest. This was not an elite squad of special ops. This was a ragtag group of townsfolk and one ex-Navy operative, but their conviction was unwavering. Once we have the captives, Zoe continued, we'll head back to the side tunnel exit. Travis, you and Leo will drive those big ranch trucks of yours up a back trail to pick them up. Naomi, you'll keep a radio channel open to me, and if anything goes bad, we abort. We can't risk a massacre. Silence settled in. They all understood the magnitude of what they were about to do. The old station clock ticked loudly. Finally, Travis sighed, resting a hand on his revolver. I've watched the Reapers terrorize this county for too long. I'm in. Martha exhaled, tension taut in her jaw. Me too. Let's end this. Leo offered a grim smile. Then I guess we'd better get to it. Zoe nodded, a swirl of gratitude and determination. Let's gather our gear and meet back here at noon. We want to hit them before they move the captives, but close enough to their departure time that we catch them off guard. The Reapers will be busy prepping vehicles, not expecting a raid from inside. She paused, letting the gravity sink in. There's no going back after this. Travis and Martha left to gather their weapons, dynamite, and other supplies. Naomi briefed Zoe on the route to the side tunnel, steep but manageable if they kept a low profile. Leo busied himself prepping the station as a fallback point, in case they had to return with wounded or needed to hole up until the feds arrived. The clock kept ticking, a reminder that each passing minute brought them closer to the showdown at the mine. By noon, the air shimmered with heat, and tension crackled around Henderson's gas and repair like an unseen storm. Zoe paced in the garage, checking the radio frequencies she'd set up on a set of battered walkie-talkies. They weren't military grade, but they offered enough range to keep in contact across the mine's perimeter. She adjusted the frequency to reduce the chance of interference or eavesdropping by the Reapers. Meanwhile, Naomi tested a small black drone that Carter had delivered via a covert courier early that morning. It wasn't top of the line, but it had a camera and enough range to scout the front gate from a safe distance. Travis arrived in a dusty pickup loaded with old lumber and feed sacks, perfect camouflage for the weapons and small crates of supplies he'd stashed underneath. Martha drove up in a heavy-duty ranch truck, towing a small trailer. She parked behind the station, stepping out to reveal a crate holding 3 sticks of dynamite, a spool of detonator cord, and a box of .308 ammo. All I could scrape up, she muttered, tossing Zoe a determined glance. They convened for a final briefing near the back office. Zoe spread the map one last time, tracing the infiltration route. The side tunnel's entrance lay about half a mile from the main gate, hidden by a thicket of mesquite and a rocky overhang. Team A enters here, Zoe reiterated. We move in quietly, neutralize any guards, find the captives. Meanwhile, Team B causes a distraction at the front gate or near the perimeter, drawing the bulk of the Reapers. Then we exfil with the hostages through the same route. Travis, you and Leo drive the trucks in once we call, load them up, and get out. Naomi pointed to a spot on the map. I'll fly the drone from this ridgeline. Once we confirm the Reapers are sending men to handle the distraction, we push in. Martha checked the small watch strapped to her wrist. We should head out now if we want to be in position before they start loading vehicles. Travis nodded, pushing away from the table. Time to go. Leo gave them each a grave, heartfelt look. You're risking your lives for this. Just know. I'm proud to stand with you. Zoe patted him on the shoulder, the unspoken camaraderie of people united by necessity. We'll be back, hopefully with the captives in tow. With that, the group split up. Team B, Travis and Leo, rolled out in the pickup, the feed sacks concealing their arsenal. They'd circle around to the mine's main gate from the eastern approach. Team A, Zoe, Naomi, and Martha, took Martha's ranch truck, heading west to the side tunnel route. The desert road was rough and riddled with dips. Heat waves danced in the distance like phantom water. No one spoke much during the drive. Each was lost in their own thoughts of how quickly this could go wrong. Zoe glanced at Naomi, who sat up front, fiddling with the drone's controller. You okay? She asked gently. Naomi breathed in, then out. Never done anything like this. At the academy, they taught me standard policing, not assaulting heavily armed criminals in hidden tunnels. Zoe offered a supportive nod. Stick to the plan and trust your instincts. You're braver than most cops I've worked with. They veered off the main road onto a faint trail that cut between low ridges. Martha slowed, eventually parking behind a cluster of large boulders. We walk from here, she announced. The plan was to keep the truck out of sight. If all went well, they'd return with the freed captives, load them up, and drive away before the Reapers regrouped. If it didn't go well, Zoe refused to dwell on that outcome. They trudged through rocky terrain, the sun's glare softened only slightly by scattered clouds drifting across the sky. The side tunnel's entrance was exactly where the map indicated, a narrow fissure in a limestone outcrop, partially obscured by mesquite and tumbleweeds. Naomi set down the small drone case. I'll find higher ground and launch the drone, she said, scanning for a spot that gave line of sight to the mine's main gate. Zoe and Martha nodded, continuing to the fissure. Zoe leaned close to the rocky opening, peering into the dim interior. A stale, earthy smell wafted out. It was cooler inside, but the darkness was almost absolute. Martha handed Zoe a flashlight with a red lens filter. Don't want a bright beam giving us away? Carefully, Zoe flicked it on. They crept in, stepping over crumbling rocks and warped timbers that once supported the tunnel's outer edges. About 20 feet in, they found a rusted padlock on a heavy metal gate. Some attempt at security, but obviously old. Martha produced a small crowbar from her pack, and with a few prying motions, the brittle padlock snapped. They eased the gate open, metal scraping lightly on concrete. A wave of stale air rushed out, carrying a hint of something else. Maybe diesel fumes or chemicals. Zoe's adrenaline spiked. They were definitely entering territory the Reapers might be using. A hiss of static came through Zoe's earpiece. Naomi's voice crackled. Drone is up. Travis and Leo are near the front gate. Looks like half a dozen Reapers are prepping 2 SUVs and a cargo van. Good news is they're distracted. I see at least 4 more Reapers inside the yard loading crates. No sign of them moving hostages yet. Zoe replied in a whisper. Roger that. We're heading deeper. Asham. They pressed forward. The tunnel sloped downward, walls damp with seeping groundwater. Broken mining carts littered the path. Soon the narrow passage opened into a broader corridor where electric lights dangled from makeshift wiring. It was clear the Reapers had refurbished parts of the mine, probably to store contraband. Zoe's pulse hammered. If they encountered guards now, there would be no stealth to rely on, only the speed of their trigger fingers. Martha set the dynamite gently by a support beam. Just in case we need to collapse this tunnel on our way out, she whispered, showing Zoe the spool of fuse wire. Zoe nodded. The plan was a last resort if Reapers gave chase or tried to trap them. They inched along for what felt like a small eternity, ears straining for the slightest sound. Drips of water, the crunch of their own boots on gravel, every noise seemed magnified in the enclosed space. At length they came to a branching intersection. One corridor sloped upward, the other continued deeper. From Naomi's drone footage, they guessed the upper path led toward the main yard. The lower one might lead to where the Reapers kept hostages. Zoe scanned the ground for fresh footprints and found some, boot treads overlapping smaller shoe prints. She pointed them out to Martha, who nodded in grim understanding. The captives had likely been forced this way. They moved deeper. The corridor opened into a rough-cut chamber, lit by a single swinging bulb. Wooden crates lined one wall. Stale mattresses were strewn across the floor, as if the captives had been kept here temporarily. But it was empty now. Zoe's chest tightened. Were they already moved? She knelt by one mattress, noticing a torn scrap of fabric. Whoever had slept here left in a hurry or by force. A faint murmur drifted from deeper within. Martha caught Zoe's eye, raised her rifle. The voices were unintelligible, but definitely human. They slid along the wall, inching closer to the source, hearts pounding. Finally, they reached a metal doorway, slightly ajar. Light spilled through the gap, accompanied by the sound of at least two people speaking in hushed Spanish. Zoe risked a quick peek. Inside was a large chamber with several metal cages, improvised from chain-link fencing, and forms slumped in them. Hostages. Martha looked to Zoe, eyes wide. They had found the captives. But also inside were two armed Reapers, pacing and occasionally peering into the cages. One said something about timing, and boss wants them ready. The other glanced at a cell phone. They were waiting for final instructions, presumably to load the captives into the cargo van Naomi had seen from the drone. Zoe's heart hammered. They had to act fast, but also quietly. One gunshot echoing in these tunnels, and every Reaper in the mine would converge on them. Zoe Harrington felt her pulse thrumming in her ears as she pressed herself against the cold stone wall, just outside the metal doorway, leading into the makeshift cell block. Next to her, Martha Lynn held her breath, tightening her grip on the rifle. Through the narrow gap, they could see two armed Sable Reapers patrolling a large chamber with chain-link enclosures. Inside those enclosures, several figures were huddled on the floor, hostages that matched the number Zoe had filmed days earlier, plus two more she hadn't seen before. The entire scene looked like a nightmare come to life. The two guards spoke in low, urgent Spanish. One kept tapping at his phone, muttering about a schedule, while the other paced back and forth. From what Zoe could gather, the cargo van outside was scheduled to arrive soon, at which point these terrified prisoners would be herded out. If Zoe and Martha were going to act, it had to be now, before those poor souls were loaded up and gone forever. Quietly, Zoe signaled the plan to Martha using hand gestures. They'd take out the guards with silent shots if possible. The metallic corridors of the old mine would carry the echo of a gunshot, but the hope was that Travis Eddings and Leo Henderson were already creating a diversion at the main entrance. Any muffled cracks might be lost amid the chaos. Zoe readied her pistol, fitted with a makeshift suppressor that Carter had managed to deliver. Martha would back her up with the rifle, also suppressed but far from perfectly. Zoe peeked again. One guard was leaning against a crate. The other took a few steps toward the caged prisoners, barking something about staying down. Zoe took a breath, aimed, and squeezed the trigger. The shot spat out with a dull pop. The guard near the crate jerked and collapsed. Immediately, his companion whirled around, raising his firearm. Before he could fire, Martha put a single round through his chest. He dropped to his knees, the gun clattering across the rocky floor. A strangled grunt escaped his lips, then silence. For a few seconds, everything was still. Zoe and Martha exchanged a look of grim relief, stepping carefully into the chamber. The captives shrank back, terrified. Zoe raised her hands palm out in a gesture of reassurance. "We're here to help," she said, voice calm despite the adrenaline surging in her veins. The prisoners stared, confusion and hope flickering on their faces. There were 7 total, 5 women, 2 men, and from their worn expressions and ragged clothes, it looked as though they'd endured days, if not weeks, of captivity. Martha located a ring of keys on one guard's belt and rushed to the cage locks. One by one, she flung the doors open. "All of you, come with us," Martha urged. "We're getting you out." Zoe spotted a younger woman who seemed too weak to stand on her own. She moved over to assist, supporting her under the arm. Tears welled in the woman's eyes. Who? Who are you? She whispered in Spanish-tinged English. Zoe gave her a gentle smile. Friends, don't worry, you'll be safe soon. The rescue was far from over, though. As if on cue, Zoe's earpiece crackled to life with Naomi Garcia's urgent voice. Zoe, Reapers are flooding out of the main gate. Travis and Leo set off some kind of explosive, but now the gang's on high alert. I'm picking up radio chatter. They know something's up inside the mine. Wetkin. Zoe cast a quick glance at Martha, who was urging the freed captives to follow her back toward the tunnel corridor. We're on our way out, Zoe hissed into the comm. Just hold them off a bit longer if you can. They moved quickly, but the rescued captives were weak and disoriented, shuffling in their threadbare shoes. Martha Lynn took the lead, scanning the pathway ahead with her rifle at the ready, while Zoe Harrington stayed behind the group, pistol drawn to protect them from any pursuit. The path back to the side tunnel felt twice as long now that they were burdened with frightened civilians. Halfway to the branching intersection, a sharp bark of voices echoed down the corridor. Zoe raised a hand, signaling for everyone to halt. 3 Reapers emerged from a side passage, guns drawn, their flashlights dancing over the damp walls. The corridor lighting was still minimal, just a few bulbs strung up here and there, so it was a murky standoff of shifting shadows. One of the Reapers yelled, "Alto!" But Zoe and Martha had no intention of stopping. Martha aimed swiftly and took a shot at the lead Reaper, catching him in the shoulder. He spun backwards with a yelp. Another Reaper returned fire, muzzle flashes lighting the tunnel in sporadic bursts. Zoe shoved the nearest captive down, pressing them to the ground, then popped up to take her own shots. 2 bullets found their mark, dropping the second Reaper. The third cursed, fired wildly, and ducked behind a corner. "Move, move!" Zoe urged, using the lull to push the captives forward. Martha threw an arm around a trembling older man whose leg had buckled. They hurried past the intersection, the Reapers cursing echoing behind them. In her earpiece, Zoe could hear Naomi again. "I see muzzle flashes inside. Are you pinned down?" Zoe panted into the mic. "We're engaged, but pushing through. Tell Travis and Leo to be ready. We'll need immediate pickup." As they neared the section where the dynamite was placed, the Reaper behind them found reinforcements. Distant shouts told Zoe that multiple gang members were now converging. She exchanged a grim look with Martha. "We need a bigger distraction," Martha whispered. Zoe nodded, glancing at the small spool of detonator cord still in Martha's pack. "Think you can set it off without bringing the roof down on us?" Martha's eyes narrowed. "We'll see." Kunwakun. She rushed to the spot where the dynamite was tucked near a support beam. Working fast, she rigged a short fuse. Zoe guided the captives further up the tunnel, placing them around a corner for relative safety. The Reaper's footsteps and shouting drew closer. Martha struck a small spark on the fuse, then sprinted up the tunnel. "Go, go!" They barely made it 20 yards before the dynamite detonated. The explosion reverberated through the mine, a thunderous roar that seemed to shake the ground itself. Dust and debris billowed in a rush of hot air, rattling Zoe's teeth. The lights flickered, some going out entirely. With any luck, the collapse would seal off or at least delay the Reapers behind them. Zoe coughed as she ushered the coughing hostages forward. One woman was sobbing uncontrollably, while another clutched a small cross to her chest, muttering prayers under her breath. Her earpiece crackled again. "Zoe, that explosion, was that you?" Naomi asked, her voice on edge. Zoe gasped for air. "We had to. Tunnel might be compromised. We're heading to the exit." Naomi's reply came with barely contained panic. "Hurry, because the Reapers outside just realized there's infiltration inside. They're regrouping near the gate. Travis and Leo are pinned down in a firefight. I'm sending them your way. Maybe they can meet you at the side exit." "Ah!" Zoe grimaced, adjusting her grip on the pistol. This was turning into an all-out war zone, with precious lives in the crossfire. She could only pray that Travis and Leo had the grit to hold on until they reached a safe vantage. Right now, the priority was to get these people out before more armed bikers flooded into the tunnels. They emerged from the darkness into the hazy midday glare filtering through the side tunnel entrance. Fresh air hit their faces like a blessing. The 7 captives squinted, dazzled by natural light after who knew how long underground. Martha Lynn took point again, scanning the rugged terrain outside. The half-collapsed path leading away from the fissure was strewn with rocks and debris, but no enemy in sight, for the moment. Zoe carefully counted heads, all 7 hostages accounted for. Some were limping, some trembling, but they were free. "Let's go," she hissed, stepping forward. Then a burst of gunfire shattered the relative calm. 2 Reapers appeared near a rocky outcropping to their right, unleashing wild shots. The echoes bounced off the canyon walls, turning the ambush into a barrage of noise and flying lead. "Down!" Zoe yelled, pushing a young man to the ground as she dropped to one knee and returned fire. Martha flanked to the left, seeking a vantage point behind a large boulder. Dust kicked up, stinging their eyes and clogging their throats. One of the Reapers took a round to the chest, crumpling with a surprised grunt, while the other retreated behind a cluster of jagged rocks. Zoe signaled to Martha, "Flank right." Martha nodded, creeping around the boulder. Another volley of gunshots rang out. Zoe's heart hammered, adrenaline blazing through her veins. She worried about the captives, cowering in the open. Her radio crackled with Naomi Garcia's frantic tone. "Zoe, where are you? Travis and Leo can't hold the main gate much longer." Zoe grit her teeth. "We're pinned at the side exit. We'll break free soon. Stand by." With Martha's suppressive fire, Zoe rushed forward, tackling the second Reaper in a close-quarter scuffle. The gangster swung the butt of his rifle, grazing Zoe's shoulder. She winced but countered with a swift elbow to his jaw, sending him sprawling. Before he could recover, she squeezed the trigger of her pistol, one shot that ended his threat. Her arms shook from the intensity, but she forced herself to remain focused. "Clear!" she called to Martha. They hurried back to the group of captives, who remained huddled in the dusty path, terrified. "Time to move," Zoe urged, voice steeled with urgency. "We have to reach the pickup point." Martha corralled the group, guiding them down a slope lined with brush. In the distance, Zoe could see glimpses of open desert, that shimmering heat haze, and hopefully, somewhere beyond, the vehicles that Travis and Leo were driving. An abrupt rumble reached their ears, a deep vibration in the ground, followed by another burst of distant gunfire. Zoe and Martha exchanged glances, both suspecting that the chaos at the main gate was escalating. If the Reapers realized the hostages were gone, they might direct their fury at the rest of the town or attempt to chase them across the open desert. The only advantage Zoe's team held was that the Sable Reapers couldn't be everywhere at once. In the confusion, Zoe realized she hadn't heard from Naomi in over a minute. "Naomi, status?" She barked into her earpiece, her voice cracking. For a moment, only static. Then Naomi's voice, breathless. "I'm on the ridge. The drone's down, shot out of the sky by one of the Reapers. But I can see Travis and Leo are fighting near the gate, pinned behind their trucks. Hurry, Zoe. We need a unified exit before the entire gang swarms us." Zoe inhaled, ignoring the pounding ache in her shoulder. "Understood. We'll rendezvous with them. If we can link up, we might stand a chance of forcing the Reapers to back off until the feds arrive." She motioned for Martha to keep leading the captives downslope. With any luck, Travis and Leo were only a short distance away. They traversed a narrow gully, carefully helping each hostage navigate the steep path. The midday sun pressed down on them, intensifying every bead of sweat and making the desert dust cling to their clothes. Martha Lynn coaxed the hostages forward with quiet reassurances. One younger woman sobbed softly, tears streaking her dusty cheeks as she stumbled on shaky legs. Zoe took point, scanning the terrain for threats. She spotted a flicker of movement to the northwest, a battered pickup truck with a ranch logo on the door. Relief flooded her. Travis Eddings. He appeared to be inching along the desert floor, weaving between small hills in an attempt to reach them. Another truck followed, presumably Leo Henderson. The rumble of gunfire still echoed in the distance, suggesting the Reapers were splitting their forces. Some were chasing down Travis and Leo. Others might be regrouping after the explosion in the mine. Zoe toggled her radio. "Travis, do you copy?" For a moment, static, then his voice crackling with stress. "We're here, but we got ambushed on the way. Lost a tire. We can still drive, but we're leaking fluid. Where are you?" Zoe could see the dust cloud from his truck and tried to orient herself. "We're about 300 yards east of you near a rocky gulch. We have the captives. We need to get them loaded and out of here ASAP. Travis swore under his breath. All right, I'll do my best to get over there. But watch out. A few Reaper bikes are on our tail. Leo's been taking pot shots to keep them back. Even as he spoke, Zoe glimpsed a pair of motorcycles cresting a small rise behind Travis's truck. Black jackets billowing in the desert wind. Damn, she muttered. She turned to Martha, who was guiding the hostages behind a large stand of scrub. We've got more Reapers incoming. We either fight or run. Martha surveyed the group of weary captives. A forced march through rough desert terrain wasn't feasible for them, especially not with armed bikers in pursuit. We hold them off until the trucks reach us. That's our only shot, Martha said, shoulders tensing. Zoe nodded, swallowing the knot of fear in her throat. Taking cover behind a boulder, she watched as the motorcycles came into clearer view. 2, then 3, swerving in the dirt. Gunshots cracked from one of the bikes, bullets thudding into the ground around Travis's truck. Leo leaned out the truck's passenger window, returning fire with a hunting rifle. One biker veered off, apparently hit, losing control and skidding in a cloud of dust. The other 2 pressed on. Zoe raised her pistol. The distance was too great for a sure shot, especially with a short-barreled sidearm, but she had to try something. She steadied her breathing, lined up the sight, and squeezed. She saw one rider flinch, but it wasn't a takedown. The bike zigzagged behind a small hill, out of view. Naomi's voice abruptly came through again. Zoe, I'm moving from the ridge to your position on foot. No sense staying up there if the drone's gone. Zoe hesitated, pressing the comm to her ear. Are you sure that's wise? Naomi's reply carried forced confidence. Better to join the fight than watch from a distance without intel. I'll be there soon. Zoe couldn't help but admire the deputy's determination. With the captives sheltered in a shallow ravine, Zoe and Martha braced themselves behind rocks, exchanging sporadic gunfire with any Reaper who ventured too close. The desert wind kicked up dust devils, swirling grit into their eyes. Time blurred as they fired, ducked, reloaded, and fired again. Over the cacophony, Zoe heard the rumble of Travis's pickup approaching, engine laboring, a broken headlight swinging wildly with each jolt. This was their moment to evacuate. But first, they had to survive the next barrage. Travis's pickup slid to a stop about 20 yards from the ravine, battered and smoking. Leo Henderson jumped out from the passenger side, rifle in hand, scanning the perimeter. Zoe wasted no time hustling the freed captives toward the truck, keeping low under withering gunfire. One Reaper took aim from behind a low dune, but Martha responded with 2 precise shots, forcing him to duck back. Get them in the truck, Zoe shouted to Leo, who waved the captives forward, shouting for them to move quickly. Doors opened, and the traumatized group clambered inside, several collapsing into tears once they realized they might be escaping for real. Travis slid over to make space, rummaging for a first aid kit to treat minor wounds. He grimaced at the truck's bullet-pocked door. Don't know how far she'll get us, he muttered. We're nearly out of coolant. Meanwhile, Naomi Garcia emerged from the north, breathless, her deputy uniform caked in dust. She dropped beside Zoe behind a rock. You weren't kidding about all-out war, Naomi panted, wiping sweat from her brow. Zoe's face was streaked with grime. We have to push through. That cargo van is probably still coming for more hostages, and we're short on time. She pointed to the smoldering horizon, where fresh dust clouds signaled more vehicles. Naomi steadied her sidearm. The feds should be en route, but who knows when they'll arrive. We might have to hold out a bit longer. Indeed, overhead, the sky was heartbreakingly empty of helicopters or planes that might herald federal agents. Zoe grit her teeth, adrenaline buzzing through every nerve. We get these people to safety, then retreat to Henderson's if necessary. It's more fortified. The engine of the pickup roared as Travis tried to get it moving. Come on, he growled, pumping the gas. The vehicle lurched, tires spinning in the sandy soil. Another hail of bullets rattled across the hood, courtesy of a Reaper with an assault rifle perched on a ridge. Martha returned fire, hitting the rifleman's leg and causing him to tumble from his vantage point. Suddenly, a black SUV careened into view from the west, kicking up a swirling plume of dust. Zoe recognized it as one of the Reaper's signature vehicles. More muzzle flashes erupted from the windows. She crouched, cursing under her breath. We can't fight them all off if we're out in the open like this. She waved frantically at Travis. Go! We'll cover you! With a squeal, the pickup gained traction, lumbering across uneven ground. Zoe, Naomi, and Martha spread out, laying down suppressive fire. One bullet shattered the SUV's windshield. The driver swerved, momentarily losing control, before accelerating again. Zoe aimed carefully, but her magazine clicked empty. She reloaded with swift hands, heart pounding. A stray bullet ricocheted off a rock near her face, showering her with stone fragments. Amid the chaos, the battered pickup disappeared over a slight rise, hopefully on its way to a safer stretch of desert road. Zoe exhaled, relieved to have the captives out of immediate harm's way. But she and the rest of her ad hoc team were far from safe. More Reapers were closing in, some on foot, others in vehicles. If they got pinned here, rescue or not, it would end badly. Naomi ducked behind the same boulder as Zoe, eyes flashing with determination. We need a fallback plan. Zoe nodded, scanning the horizon. We make a fighting retreat, get to our own vehicles, and regroup at Henderson's. That place is at least partially fortified. Maybe we can hold until federal backup arrives. Martha joined them, face etched with grim resolve. I'll lay down cover. You two move first. Under Martha Lynn's covering fire, Zoe Harrington and Naomi Garcia sprinted toward a cluster of vehicles parked some 100 yards away, partially hidden behind a low ridge. Even from a distance, Zoe could see bullet holes pockmarking the doors and windshields. Remnants of the earlier exchange. A swirl of dust whipped around them, the heat beating down relentlessly. When they arrived, Zoe threw open the driver's door of an old Jeep they'd stashed earlier. She hopped in, yanked the gear shift into neutral, and turned the key. The engine coughed but wouldn't catch. Come on, she muttered, adrenaline spiking again. Naomi kept watch, pistol raised, scanning for approaching Reapers. Meanwhile, bullets whistled overhead, kicked up by the half-dozen bikers circling the area on motorcycles. From behind a rock outcropping, Martha fired a well-aimed shot that toppled one rider. His bike slid out from under him, spinning in a cloud of dust. Another Reaper roared past him, nearly colliding with the fallen cycle. Their formation was breaking up under the relentless resistance. Zoe twisted the key a second time, and the Jeep finally sputtered to life, the engine whining. That's it, Naomi shouted, sliding into the passenger seat. Let's go, let's go! Zoe revved the engine, watching Martha wave from her vantage. We can't leave her, Zoe barked. Naomi nodded. We'll pull up alongside so she can jump in. As the Jeep jerked forward, lurching over uneven terrain. Zoe steered with one hand and reloaded her pistol with the other, every nerve on edge. Martha sprinted toward them, ignoring the swirling dust. A Reaper on a black Harley accelerated from behind, closing in on her. Zoe slammed the brakes, whipped the Jeep around, and leveled her pistol out the open window. She fired in a short burst, the bullets pinging off the bike. The rider veered, lost control, and crashed. Martha dove and tumbled into the back seat, breath ragged, her rifle clanging on the floor. Zoe didn't hesitate. She floored the accelerator. The tires churned up loose gravel, the Jeep fishtailing as it sped away from the chaotic battlefield. Behind them, the Reapers regrouped, some switching from bikes to an SUV for the chase. A glance in the rear-view mirror revealed a swirl of dust and scowling faces. They're not giving up, Naomi warned, glancing over her shoulder. Zoe nodded, pressing the pedal to the floor, though the Jeep could only muster so much speed. They barreled across the desert, heading for the main road that led back to Henderson's Gas and Repair. By now, the captives were presumably en route to a safer location with Travis and Leo. At least that part of the mission was successful. But if the Reapers realized the hostages were gone, it would only inflame their rage. Zoe guessed they'd focus all available muscle on punishing whoever dared challenge them. Naomi clutched the dash as the Jeep bounced over a rocky patch. We're going to have to fight again at Henderson's, she said grimly. Zoe was all too aware. The station was a decent spot for a last stand, reinforced windows, vantage points on the roof. But it was still just a gas station. Against a determined gang with the sheriff in their pocket, it might not hold for long. Unless, of course, the cavalry arrived. Over the howl of the wind and engine, Zoe heard a faint whoop-whoop in the distance. At first, she thought it was a trick of her ears, but then she looked up. Helicopter, she muttered, glimpsing a speck in the brilliant sky. Could it be the feds? The Reapers behind them must have seen it too. because they slowed, uncertain. Naomi's eyes went wide. That might be them. We need to get to Henderson's and hold out until they land. Turen. Back at Henderson's Gas and Repair, the parking lot was eerily quiet, like the eye of a storm. Leo Henderson had arrived a short while ago, dropping off the freed captives at a safer location on the outskirts of town. With Travis's truck barely limping along, they'd had to ditch it and secure alternative rides. But they got the hostages clear. Now Leo crouched behind a makeshift barricade near one of the gas pumps, shotgun in hand. He heard the distant roar of an engine and peered across the shimmering heat haze. A battered Jeep barreled into view, dust pluming behind it. Moments later, it screeched into the station lot, nearly colliding with the pump before coming to a halt. Zoe jumped out along with Naomi and Martha. "They're right behind us," Zoe shouted, adrenaline lighting up her eyes. "We saw a chopper overhead. Might be the feds." Leo exhaled in a rush of relief. "We stashed supplies inside. I've boarded up windows. We can hunker down." Behind them, the desert road churned under the wheels of the Reaper's vehicles, drawing closer by the second. The group wasted no time. They dashed into the station, each taking a position behind counters or reinforced shelving. Leo flipped off the main lights, leaving only a few backup bulbs glowing. The soft illumination would make it harder for the bikers to see inside, but easier for them to see out. No sooner had they braced themselves than the Reapers arrived in a chaotic swarm. 2 SUVs and 4 motorcycles screeched to a stop on the highway in front of Henderson's. Dust clouds settled, revealing at least 9 or 10 men, armed to the teeth. Among them was Damon Reaper West himself, the wiry gang leader with a jagged scar on his cheek. He sneered at the station, brandishing an assault rifle. Next to him stood a tall, broad-shouldered figure in a tan uniform, Sheriff Grayson. The crooked lawman barked orders, and his presence ratcheted up the tension. From behind a display rack inside, Zoe peered through a narrow gap. She recognized the sheriff, his face contorted with anger. Over her earpiece, Naomi whispered, "He's here. So much for hoping he'd stay out of it." Zoe cursed softly. If the sheriff was present, it meant they faced not just a gang, but also local police resources. She also noticed at least one deputy milling near the vehicles, looking uncertain. Reaper stepped forward, raising a bullhorn. His voice crackled across the parking lot. "Hey, Henderson, we know you're in there. Bring out that Navy chick and my hostages, or we'll burn this place to the ground." Zoe stiffened. So he still thought they had the captives here. Good. That meant Travis and the freed hostages had successfully escaped. She took a small satisfaction in that. Leo exchanged a glance with Martha, nodding for her to stay ready. He shouted back, "We don't have your people, West. They're gone, and you're not getting your hands on anyone else." The sheriff's amplified voice cut in. "This is Sheriff Grayson. You are harboring criminals, Henderson. Surrender immediately, and I might spare your life." Zoe's lip curled in disgust. The audacity of him turning a blind eye to the Reaper's atrocities was sickening. Now he dared to call them criminals? A tense beat passed. Reaper switched the bullhorn off, turned to his men, and nodded. Guns raised, the Reapers began firing on the station in a thunderous volley. Bullets shattered the front windows, thudded into the wooden barricades, and ricocheted off metal racks. Inside, Zoe and her allies scrambled for cover, returning fire in carefully placed bursts. The firefight had begun in earnest. The interior of Henderson's erupted into chaos. Glass shards rained from broken windows. Shelves were pulverized, sending snack bags and soda bottles flying in every direction. Zoe Harrington crouched behind a chest-high barricade of pallets, lining up her pistol sights on a Reaper, who brazenly sprinted toward the station door. She squeezed the trigger and he dropped, clutching his thigh. Another bullet whined past Zoe's ear, making her duck again. Martha Lynn fired from a side window, picking off a second assailant who tried to flank the building. Naomi Garcia took a position near the back exit, ensuring they wouldn't be ambushed from behind. The thunderous gunfire made conversation impossible, so they relied on hand signals to coordinate. Meanwhile, Sheriff Grayson and Damon Reaper West lingered near their vehicles, apparently content to let their underlings do the dirty work. Across the battered store, Leo Henderson loaded a fresh shell into his shotgun. He called to Zoe between blasts of gunfire. "We can't hold them off forever. Maybe we should retreat out the back and make a run for it. Zoe popped off 2 shots, forcing a Reaper to duck behind a pump. If we run, they'll chase us across open ground, she yelled back. At least in here, we have cover. We just need to hold until federal backup arrives. As if on cue, a low thumping vibration rippled through the air, growing louder by the second. Zoe risked a glance through a bullet-riddled window and spotted a black helicopter hovering far above, descending steadily. The distant shape had drawn closer. She recognized it as a possible DEA or DH chopper. No Reaper markings anyway. It glinted in the harsh sunlight, ominous yet hopeful. Reaper must have noticed it too. Through the swirling dust, Zoe saw him snarl at Grayson, gesturing skyward. The sheriff looked up, then barked orders. The Reapers began focusing their fire on the station's roof, possibly trying to prevent a helicopter landing or at least keep the defenders pinned. Bullet holes riddled the sign that once read Henderson's Gas and Repair in neon. Zoe's earpiece crackled to life. This is Agent Marta Ellison, Homeland Security. We have a visual on hostiles outside a gas station on Route 18, requesting identification of friendlies inside. Relief flooded Zoe. Ellison, this is Zoe Harrington. We're pinned down with 4 friendlies inside the station. Hostiles estimated at 10 plus, including local sheriff. Approach with caution. They're armed and violent. Ellison's voice was clipped. Understood. We have backup on the ground about 5 minutes out. 5 minutes, Zoe muttered to herself, adrenaline spiking. We just need to hold 5 more minutes. She relayed the message to Naomi, Martha, and Leo, who all braced themselves for the next wave. Outside, Reaper realized time was running short. With an enraged roar, he directed his men to close in for a final assault. 3 bikers rushed the door, guns blazing, while others peppered the windows from afar. A barrage of bullets ripped through the store, splintering shelves and shredding the old posters on the walls. Zoe ducked behind a heavy freezer, the metal shell dinging from impacts. Naomi shouted in pain from somewhere near the back. Zoe's heart lurched. She craned her neck to see the deputy clutching her arm, blood seeping through her sleeve. I'm okay, Naomi gritted out, still raising her pistol. Just grazed. The onslaught intensified, but the station's defenders fired back with unyielding determination. Martha nailed a Reaper who'd tried to vault through a shattered window. Leo unleashed a booming shotgun blast at another attacker crawling behind the soda machine. Still, the lines of bullet holes creeping across the walls suggested their cover was disintegrating, piece by piece. A piercing siren split the air, cutting through the gunfire like a blade. Multiple SUV headlights appeared on the highway, followed by loudspeakers blaring, "Federal agents! Drop your weapons!" In a flash, the Reapers hesitated, exchanging panicked glances. Even Sheriff Grayson retreated behind his department vehicle, his face twisting as he realized he was massively outgunned. The cavalry had arrived, Agent Marta Ellison and her strike team. From the station window, Zoe Harrington glimpsed a convoy of black SUVs with government plates screeching to a halt. Armed agents in tactical gear piled out, forming a perimeter around the Reapers. Spotlights snapped on, bathing the area in bright white light. The Reapers, who moments ago were on the offensive, now found themselves surrounded. Damon Reaper West threw furious commands at his men, some of whom tried to flee back to their bikes, only to be met with more agents appearing in their path. Gunfire resumed, but this time from the federal side. A precise volley of rounds forced the bikers to the ground. One agent took up a position behind a ballistic shield, shouting for them to surrender. Amid the confusion, a helicopter roared overhead, casting dust everywhere. Zoe and her companions took the opportunity to regroup. She peeked out the door, gun still raised. "Federal team is here!" she yelled to Martha and Leo, who gave triumphant whoops. Naomi, cradling her injured arm, exhaled a pained laugh of relief. In the swirl of lights, dust, and shouting, Reaper tried to rally a last stand. He bellowed, "Don't let them take us. We go down fighting." A couple of die-hard loyalists answered his call, firing sporadic shots toward the agents. But it was futile. Ellison's team advanced with disciplined efficiency. Within minutes, half the Reapers were on the ground, hands laced behind their heads. Another handful lay wounded, moaning in the dirt. Sheriff Grayson, stuck behind his cruiser, debated his next move. Zoe watched as he peeked over the hood, eyes filled with panic. Agent Ellison's amplified voice rang out. Sheriff Grayson, step away from your vehicle and drop your weapon. We have evidence of your involvement in armed conspiracy and human trafficking. Grayson's face contorted with disbelief, then anger. He fired 2 wild shots at the agents, but they responded instantly. One bullet pinged the cruiser's metal, another whizzed past. Grayson ducked again, cursing. He had nowhere to go. Eventually, with his men pinned or arrested, Reaper's bravado cracked. He tossed his rifle down, raising his hands in bitter defeat. Grayson followed suit, emerging with trembling fury. Agents swiftly cuffed them, the bright glare of spotlights exposing every detail of their downfall. Zoe and her group cautiously stepped out of the station, guns lowered. Several agents converged on them, weapons half lowered, scanning for threats. Ellison herself, wearing a tactical vest with HSI emblazoned in white letters, approached with a stern expression. Zoe Harrington? She said, glancing between Zoe and the others. Zoe nodded, breathing heavily, her pistol still clutched in her hand. Yes, we're the ones who contacted you through Naomi. Ellison gave a curt nod, eyes flicking to Naomi. Deputy Garcia, good work. She looked over at Martha, Leo, and Zoe with a grudging respect. You're all lucky you made it this far. We've got paramedics on the way. Behind Ellison, Reaper and Grayson were forced onto their knees by 2 agents, wrists zip-tied. Reaper glared at Zoe, seething with rage, while Grayson stared at the ground, a broken man who realized he'd gambled on the wrong side. Zoe's heart pounded with a heady mix of relief, exhaustion, and lingering adrenaline. They had survived, freed the hostages, and now the Sable Reapers, along with their corrupt sheriff, were in federal custody. Within an hour, the once chaotic scene took on the structured bustle of a crime scene. Federal agents cordoned off Henderson's gas and repair with yellow tape. They photographed bullet casings, bagged evidence, and methodically searched the Reapers' vehicles. A triage area was set up near the gas pumps, where paramedics treated the wounded. The whir of the helicopter overhead died down as it landed in an open patch of desert, rotor wash sending more dust into the air. Zoe found herself leaning against the station's front counter, which was riddled with bullet holes, waiting for a medic to finish bandaging a small shrapnel cut on her leg. Across from her, Naomi Garcia sat on a stool, arm in a sling after receiving a thorough bandage for the bullet graze. Martha Lynn and Leo Henderson hovered nearby, both battered and exhausted, but miraculously uninjured beyond scrapes and bruises. Never thought I'd see the day, Leo muttered, glancing at the squad of agents combing through the rubble. Silver Butte might actually be free of these monsters. Naomi rubbed her tired eyes. We got lucky the feds arrived when they did. Another 5 minutes and we might have been overrun. She looked at Zoe, eyes reflecting gratitude. Thank you for everything. Zoe managed a wan smile, though exhaustion weighed heavy on her. We all did our part. Travis and the others too. Speaking of which, I hope the captives made it safely out of the danger zone. Right on cue, Naomi's phone buzzed. She read a text message, then exhaled with relief. Travis says they're safe at an undisclosed ranch. All the freed hostages are being given food, water, and medical attention. He's in contact with the feds who'll set up an official rescue center. A wave of relief washed over Zoe. That was the final piece. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the tension seep out. We did it, she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Her mind drifted to the faces of those captives in the mine, the terror etched into every line of their features. Now they had a chance at recovery, at rebuilding their lives. Agent Marta Ellison stepped into the station, removing her tactical helmet. She was a no-nonsense woman with sharp features and a direct gaze. She surveyed the group with measured respect. We've apprehended over a dozen Sable Reapers, seized significant weapon caches, and we'll be combing that mine for additional evidence. Thanks to your footage and intel, we have enough to indict them on federal trafficking charges. She turned to Naomi. Deputy Garcia, you'll be asked to testify regarding Sheriff Grayson's collusion, if you're willing. Naomi nodded, jaw set. I am. He betrayed the badge and destroyed this town. He deserves whatever sentence he gets. Ellison's gaze shifted to Zoe. And you, Ms. Harrington, we owe you a debt. Without your infiltration, we might never have confirmed the location of those hostages. But I have to ask, your background is classified? Zoe offered a guarded smile. Former Navy, yes. Let's just say I've had experience dealing with hostile groups. Ellison nodded, not pressing. Fair enough. We might have questions later, but for now, get some rest. A debriefing will happen in the next 24 hours. We'll coordinate with local authorities who aren't compromised. She paused, turning to Leo. Henderson, your station took quite a beating. We'll see about any compensation or protective detail in case more Reapers try to retaliate. Leo swallowed. Appreciate it, Agent. But if they send more, we'll be ready. He cast a glance at Zoe, Naomi, and Martha, drawing strength from the small band that had stood against the odds. Ellison nodded and left them, stepping back into the flurry of activity outside. A sense of calm settled in the station's ruined interior, each of them aware that though the fight was over, a new chapter was about to begin. By late afternoon, the dust settled in Silver Butte. News spread quickly of the dramatic showdown at Henderson's Gas and Repair, culminating in the arrest of the notorious Sable Reapers and their colluding sheriff. Residents who had lived in fear for months, some for years, ventured out onto the main street, eyeing the federal vehicles and uniformed agents with a mix of amazement and tentative hope. It was as though a dark cloud had lifted from the town's skyline. Zoe, Martha, and Naomi stood outside the station, wincing at the bullet-riddled pumps and shattered glass. Leo Henderson was off to the side, talking with a few neighbors who'd come by, likely ensuring them that the danger was over. The group's mood was subdued, a mixture of relief and the raw realization of how close they'd all come to tragedy. They found a quiet moment to talk near the back of the station, away from the swirling chaos of agents and curious townspeople. Naomi leaned against the building, still cradling her bandaged arm. You're not obligated to stick around for the formalities, she said, looking at Zoe, but I'm guessing there's going to be questions about your skill set. Zoe gazed at the dusty horizon. Agent Ellison will probably want a statement at least, but after that I might move on. This was never my home. I just happened to stop here. The Reapers made it personal. Martha folded her arms. You did more than just stop by. You saved lives. Helped this town find some backbone again. Naomi nodded in agreement. Silver Butte owes you a debt we can't repay easily. Zoe's lips twitched in a faint smile. I'm glad I could help, but the real credit goes to folks like you. Naomi, who never gave up on justice. Leo, who stood his ground. Travis, Martha, everyone who risked their necks. You were the spark that ignited the fuse. I just brought some extra kindling. Her gaze slid to the battered Jeep parked behind the building. Part of her yearned to ride off into the sunset, just as she'd arrived, alone, free of entanglements. But another part wondered if she'd find any sense of rest after all this. Naomi started to speak, but was interrupted by the sound of footsteps on gravel. Agent Ellison appeared, arms crossed. Hope I'm not intruding, she said. Just wanted to tell you, we finished sweeping the mine. Found evidence of large-scale trafficking, makeshift cells, drug labs, the works. This is going to be a nationwide story once the indictments drop. The cartel connections are deeper than we suspected, but at least we've severed one major artery. Her tone was resolute. We'll keep a presence in Silver Butte for a while. Ensure no Reaper remnants cause trouble. Zoe felt a weight lift from her shoulders. That's good to hear. Ellison's gaze lingered on Zoe. I also wanted you to know, there's a place for people with your experience in the fight against these cartels, if you're interested. Could be stateside or even international. The offer hung in the air. Naomi and Martha exchanged glances, sensing the gravity of the moment. Zoe inhaled slowly, the desert heat pressing down. She'd been seeking peace, trying to outrun her ghosts, yet it seemed destiny kept pulling her back into the fray. I might consider it, she said at length, but for now I need to debrief, rest up. Maybe I'll see where the wind takes me. Ellison dipped her head, respecting the answer. We'll be here if you change your mind. Meanwhile, get some downtime. You've earned it. In the days that followed, Silver Butte felt like a town emerging from a long nightmare. Agents and local volunteers cleared the debris at Henderson Station, boarding up shattered windows and hauling away wrecked equipment. A sense of cautious optimism pervaded the dusty streets. With Sheriff Grayson behind bars and the Sable Reapers either jailed or on the run, people ventured outside without the constant pall of fear. The rescued hostages, now in federal care, began the long process of recovery. Some had families who'd been searching for them, Others were undocumented immigrants caught in a cruel trafficking pipeline. Zoe heard from Naomi that several had expressed heartfelt gratitude, wanting to meet her and the others who risked everything to save them. But Zoe declined for now, not out of indifference, but because she wasn't sure she could handle the emotional weight of those encounters. She'd seen too much suffering already. On the third day after the showdown, Zoe found herself standing on the porch of the station, which had become a makeshift gathering spot for townspeople wanting to see the aftermath. Leo Henderson joined her, his face etched with relief and a quiet pride. "Got a call from the insurance folks," he said, chuckling wryly. "Not sure they'll believe the story, but at least there's coverage for bullet holes." Zoe's returning smile was gentle. "Glad to hear you'll rebuild. This place is important to the town." He nodded, gazing at the horizon. "Thanks to you, we still have a town." A beat passed. "You thinking of staying on, or?" Zoe knew the question was coming. "Honestly, I don't know," she admitted. "I've spent years going from one fight to the next. Part of me just wants to ride out and find some quiet corner of the world." Leo studied her. "But another part of you can't walk away when you see injustice, right?" Zoe's jaw clenched softly and she gave a curt nod. "Yeah, that's the bind." Before they could speak further, Naomi Garcia pulled up in her cruiser, now under the supervision of a new interim sheriff from a neighboring county. She stepped out, arm still in a sling, but wearing a determined smile. "Heard we're holding a small celebration at George's Diner tomorrow night. A way to thank everyone who stood up against the gang." Zoe raised an eyebrow. "Celebration? After all that bloodshed?" Naomi shrugged lightly. "Sometimes you have to mark the good amid the bad. The town needs closure." Leo patted Zoe on the shoulder. "You should come. Won't be a big parade or anything, but folks here really appreciate what was done for them." Zoe let out a slow breath. "All right," she said, a half smile creeping onto her lips. "I could do that. One night of celebration won't kill me." Naomi grinned. "Great. You deserve it." That afternoon, Zoe took a solitary walk through the main street. She saw boarded-up windows, bullet holes in walls, and the faint echoes of the terror that once gripped this town. Now, though, people waved at her, offering warm greetings. Children played on sidewalks without an air of fear. The transformation was subtle but profound, like the desert after a rare rainfall, stirring dormant seeds to life. She paused at the edge of town, staring at the open road that stretched toward the horizon. Part of her wanted to rev up the motorcycle and vanish into the sunset. Another part felt tethered here, at least until the dust truly settled. For once, she allowed herself a moment of gratitude. Life had thrown her into yet another battle, but she'd emerged with new allies and a clearer sense of purpose. The next evening, George's Diner was buzzing with subdued excitement. In defiance of the scorching heat, locals packed every booth, cradling cups of sweet tea or iced coffee. A hand-painted sign out front read, "Thank you, heroes," with an American flag motif. It was a small gesture, but in Silver Butte, it meant everything. Zoe Harrington arrived wearing the same dusty jacket she'd worn that first day at Henderson Station. The memories of the firefight still fresh. The diner fell quiet momentarily as people turned to see her enter. Soft smiles and nods of respect replaced the apprehensive stares from before. She made her way to a booth where Naomi, Martha, and Leo were gathered. Travis sat next to them, hat in hand, beaming with a humble pride. "Hey, stranger," Naomi said, sliding over to make room. Her sling was off, replaced by a bandage hidden under her shirt sleeve, but she still moved gingerly. Martha lifted a glass of lemonade in salute. "Glad you came." "Ah." Zoe settled in, inhaling the comforting aroma of fried food and apple pie. "Feels surreal," she admitted. 3 days ago, we were in a firefight. Now we're having pie and coffee like it's normal." Leo chuckled. "That's the beauty and madness of small-town life. Extremes, but also resilience." As they chatted, Georgia herself came over, bearing plates of pie. "On the house," she said softly, tears of gratitude shining in her eyes. "I can't thank you enough for what you did." "Us," Zoe offered a faint smile. "Just happy to see the town safe." Conversation flowed around the table, a mixture of relief and remembrance. Naomi talked about potential reforms for the local sheriff's department, how a new election would be held soon. Martha described how the ranchers were banding together to watch for any Reaper remnants skulking around. Leo planned to rebuild his station stronger than ever, turning the bullet holes into a part of the town's folklore. "Remember that day we kicked the Reapers out?" While they ate, the door swung open to reveal Agent Marta Ellison, wearing civilian clothes but exuding the same no-nonsense aura. She approached the booth, offering a polite nod. "Hope I'm not interrupting. Just wanted to say goodbye. I'm shipping out tonight. The case is well in hand." Naomi gestured for her to join, but Ellison declined. "Only a minute. Miss Harrington, can I speak with you privately?" They stepped outside, the warm dusk air wrapping around them like a blanket. The neon sign of the diner cast flickering light across the pavement. Ellison spoke quietly. "You did a good thing here. There aren't many private citizens who'd risk their necks for strangers." Zoe folded her arms. "Those people weren't strangers once you know what's happening. Somebody had to do something." Ellison nodded, smiling faintly. "I meant what I said before. There's room for someone like you in a special federal unit. We tackle trafficking, cartel operations, the works. It's not an easy life, but it's direct action. I can put your name forward if you want." Zoe let the offer hang in the air, her thoughts drifting to the battered faces of those captives. She also thought about the nightmares that might resurface if she kept leaping into danger. "Thanks," she said finally. "But for now, I need time. I'll keep your card, though." Ellison gave a respectful dip of her head. "Understandable. If you change your mind, call me." With that, she extended a handshake. Zoe accepted. The agent vanished into the twilight, leaving Zoe with the weight of a choice yet unmade. Returning inside, she found her friends laughing around the booth, talking about simpler times. She slid into her seat, picking at the remains of her pie. The warmth of camaraderie was a stark contrast to the violence they'd endured together. As the diner's chatter swelled around her, Zoe felt something unexpectedly comforting, a sense of home, if only temporary. For a moment, she allowed herself to believe that maybe she'd earned the right to linger here, to find solace among good people who'd faced down evil and won. Tomorrow she might ride away in search of the next chapter, or she might stick around to see Silver Butte fully heal. The future was wide open, as endless as the desert horizon. As the smoke cleared and silence returned to the streets of Shadow Creek, townsfolk emerged, astonished yet proud. They had witnessed a modern-day legend unfold, a brave former Navy SEAL and ordinary heroes uniting to reclaim their town from ruthless outlaws. The message was clear. The American spirit of freedom, loyalty, and courage still burned brightly, even in the darkest times. Now, with criminals behind bars and peace restored, life began anew in Shadow Creek. Neighbors shook hands, exchanging knowing glances that said more than words ever could. They had faced evil together and won. Our heroine quietly rode into the horizon, leaving behind a legacy of bravery and honor that would never fade. If this story touched your heart or brought memories of courage and brotherhood, please subscribe and stay with us for more thrilling adventures. Comment below and share your thoughts. What scene resonated most with you? Let's keep the conversation alive, celebrating true grit and the timeless values we cherish.